Okay, welcome everybody. It's 2:30 on March 18th, 2019. It's our monthly Montgomery County Board of Elections meeting. We have a quorum. Our election director, Margaret, is home not feeling well. Margaret, we hope you feel better. Margaret, can you hear us? You're on the phone. Margaret?
She's going to keep us on mute until she's been addressed.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay.
My phone is blocked.
Okay.
And she'll keep us on mute until we address
Okay,
her.
we have a quorum. So our first item is the approval of minutes, both the board meeting and the executive session meeting of January 28th, 2019. Is there a motion?
That you what? Accept them?
Well, he made a no, we'll have discussion.
Oh, all right.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes. I'd
Okay.
like to have my name added to the list of attendees on the January 28th meeting.
Done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other discussion?
Is this a motion as amended or what?
No, we didn't even move
Yeah,
to
he-
approve it. This is
No,
just
no,
for
he made a
discussion.
motion to approve.
To approve it.
With amendments?
Alan, are you including the amendments?
Approved as amended and presented to us today.
And seconded, Jackie?
Yes.
All right, then, any discussion?
I assume this is the same as the last version we saw by Edith.
I take it.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something?
My only problem is too long. We can do summary report. We get the same things. This is too much.
We're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Did you want to talk about it now?
Well, unless you want to, go ahead and deal with. It's not going to
Yeah.
affect these minutes.
Right.
Okay.
But yes,
You want to make it a new business? You have some suggestions about what you want to do it now?
No, she can do that.
whatever people think. Jackie and I worked on this seemingly never-ending issue of the minutes and how we can get as complete as possible minutes, but without what we seem to go through at each board meeting with the longer written minutes. And so I have a proposal that I want to put forward. Whether you think it should come under this item or new business makes no difference to me.
Well, why don't we approve these, and then maybe new business, because it's a...
Sure.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
As amended.
As amended. We'll do them. We're going to do them jointly, the board meeting and the executive session. All those in favor? Aye. No one opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. We're going to have we have a number of items for executive session, so we're going to add that to the agenda. Okay.
So we have to approve the executive session.
We did.
You did?
Yeah, we did them both.
No, separate. You have to do separately.
Separate?
Yeah,
Okay.
I move we accept the executive committee session. What was the date?
As
we said?
amended?
As amended. What date was it?
January
The
28th.
January 28th.
I'm sorry, as amended, there was no actual amendments
That's
submitted.
good.
Okay.
We just
Okay.
accept
Is
the
there a
minutes.
second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Well, I want my name from that one too, if you
For the
list
executive
names.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Name is there. Oh.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed? Okay, so both sets of minutes are approved. We're going to have an executive session.
Mr. Chair, the executive session, just so it's clear for the record, will be to discuss a confidential voter request and possible litigation.
Okay,
So seek legal advice regarding both.
okay. Any public comments? Anybody sign up for that?
Yes, we do have someone who'd like to address the board.
Okay.
Public comment is coming.
Welcome, Alex. Alex is here. So we have everybody's here. Who wants to?
Garland would like
Oh,
to
where's
address
Lynn?
She-
Oh, Lynn, come on. Good to see you. Welcome.
Just public comment.
Welcome. You want me to address the board now or when it's relevant?
No, public comments. We do it now.
We just got to that part of the agenda.
Okay.
You want to come up? You want to
Come
come
on
over
up
here?
here,
Come over here,
Lynn.
Lynn. Sit over here.
Lynn, come on up here.
Welcome.
Thank you for
allowing the public comments, I wanted to talk briefly about the same issue that I've spoken to you about before. And it's again relevant this year, and more relevant this year for a number of reasons. But I'm concerned about the security of Maryland's absentee ballot voting system, and in particular the online ballot delivery process. And there's legislation right now that's on this subject, and I know you guys sometimes weigh in on legislation, so I want to draw your attention to that. And in the past, you have written a letter to kind of say how it affects Montgomery County, and I think that would be very important to do again. You have new figures for the 2018 election, and I think that would be important. But I want the things that I want to stress that I've talked about before are that Maryland is way out of line with all the other states. 47 other states don't allow this, and Washington State and Alaska does, but only in a very, very limited capacity. Even though Washington State is a larger state than Maryland and has all absentee ballots, all ballots by mail, Maryland has 5 times as many of these ballots as Washington State. So it's again, Maryland is just way out of line. Another issue is that a lot has happened in recent years to make us more worried about it than they have been in the past. And I think you guys are familiar with some of the issues. Like Bike Grid was owned by a foreign power and had access to all the credentials of all the Maryland voters. And even the MBA registration issue is relevant because the 80,000 people who were supposed to have their address changes, that mistake wasn't noticed. And so you really have to understand, if that isn't noticed, how are we going to understand if there's fraud in the absentee ballot system? And also, as you all know, there was fraud in North Carolina. If that kind of fraud had happened here, it would have been much harder to detect because it wouldn't involve people and mailed ballots. It would be all done over the internet, which is very, very hard to detect from all over the world. And I want to mention one other fraud that's recently been discovered that's very similar to what the cybersecurity experts are worried about in Maryland, and that is in Alberta, Canada. There was an election that's being investigated right now where it seems like over 1,000 absentee ballots were hijacked by getting the ballots directed to the wrong email. And that's the type of fraud that the computer scientists are really worried about here. And I would say, again, Maryland has been warned by about 6 or 7 top computer scientists in the world about how vulnerable this is. And I think we should listen to the scientists who are saying that this is a really vulnerable system. So I wanted to...
What do you think we should do about it, Len?
I think Montgomery County is the most impacted of any of the counties because you guys have to duplicate so many ballots. And I think you should both present the burden that it is to affect you. I mean, you guys aren't the ones who establish the systems itself, but you do get greatly affected by the systems. And I think that, I'm glad you asked that question. I think you should write a letter again about the burden that it puts on you guys, the amount of cost it is, how hard it is to protect that process, and to make sure, the vote that is counted is not the vote. The ballot that is counted is not the ballot that the voter has ever seen. And that is a very scary thing. And I can tell you, because you have that enormous duplication process, I don't know how many ballots exactly Montgomery County duplicated in the last election.
28,000, was it?
28. I mean,
Well, I forget the exact number.
but when you talk about races in Montgomery County that have been decided by 6 or 9 votes, 28,000 is a huge number, and that's a very hard process to get right and to make sure that there's no one's filling out unvoted ovals or anything like that. So what I ask is that you guys again write a letter to the board and copy the sponsors of the legislation and the chairman of each of the committees and the leadership, and say that this is a burden to Montgomery County, and you'll have to decide for yourselves, but I hope you support
What is
the
the status of the legislation, Lynn?
The status of the legislation is, so far, it has not moved. There's a bill, a matching bill in the House and in the Senate.
To do
what would they do?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. So it would do 2 things, and slightly different than last year. The first thing it would do was it would limit online ballot delivery to those voters who need it most and are required by federal law. It would, like other states do, so it would limit online ballot delivery to military voters, overseas voters, and voters with disabilities. Then it would do something different than last year. It would also open it up to any other voter. I haven't memorized the wording, but any other voter who needs to receive their ballot electronically in order to vote, or something like that. So
Much more limited than that.
It's something, I don't have the exact words. You might have the exact words.
I don't remember the exact words. I can find it for people, but it requires that they only be able to vote by that means and no other.
How do they prove that?
That's the question. And also, do we want to be in a situation where we're telling voters
That they are or not.
Right. We're not going to send this to you because you could go to early voting. We're not going to send this to you unless you tell us where
That we
you
have,
can go on election.
we have no ability to judge that.
All of that
Right.
type of stuff is usually solved in regulation. And I would say in the past we've been able to deal with that. In the past, the initial law, and in law in many states, is that voters, let's say voters with disabilities, can vote this way. And I believe it's just a self-proclaimed amount, but I'm not an expert there. But
So
it's a
your
good question.
suggestion, am I hearing correctly, that your suggestion is that last clause we don't want?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting that we want these bills because instead of everyone being able to vote this way,
It limits it enough.
It limits it enough, and the reason that's significant is because if you reduce the target of a bad actor, it will not only make it less attractive to do the bad things, but also it will be less likely to affect an election outcome. So what the cybersecurity experts are saying is let's limit the target in line with what the other states have.
It sounds to me like adding that last part this time, however, is this would virtually be bringing back the old absentee voting type of thing, that you have to have an excuse.
No,
which-
anyone can vote by absentee. It wouldn't affect anyone is allowed to vote by absentee. There's no restriction on that.
It would affect their ability to get electronic
The
ballot
electronic
delivery.
part of
They
it,
would have
it
to
would.
demonstrate that they needed
Yeah.
it.
They'd have to do whatever the regulations say. But that's
No,
what
no,
people
no.
do in other
Whatever the
states.
statute says, the regulation has to be within what the statute says.
Right.
The statute says, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'm trying to pull it up on my phone. That I didn't know this was going to be on the agenda today. But the statute says that that you either are a part of these specific groups, and I personally have a problem with having specific groups having one method of voting and other groups having other methods of voting. But if you're not in one of those groups, you have to demonstrate that that basically you wouldn't be able to vote unless you had this method. And I think that's a very difficult standard to meet, and an even harder standard for us to litigate every time. I don't mean that literally, but every time somebody comes to us and wants to vote in this fashion, if they're not in those two categories, how are we going to determine as to whether they are in that category
All right,
or not?
let me ask you this question, whomever. How do we determine that now, that somebody is disabled or that somebody is overseas?
The honor system.
It's the honor system.
Right.
Okay.
In other words, when they did this before and it was limited to overseas and disabled voters, you had to basically.
So it's all the honor system.
It's the honor system. It's
Okay, that's
no different than so much of this process is, which is it's the honor system.
Or people that came and said, I'm going to be out of town
Right.
on election when we
All
only
right,
had
so there's
one
not.
day. and
That's
that
what I
sort of
wanted
thing.
to clear. So there isn't any judgment
Well,
on our part
I can
anytime.
understand, the military overseas and disabled. I'm not saying I accept it, but I understand those categories and how that comes about. But broadening it to this other, I think is troubling.
I think it was in response to some of the senators who were concerned that someone might have gone out of town at the last minute and needs to get it electronically, or if there was a hurricane, needs to get it electronically. So it was meant to be a generous compromise. So that's why it was done. But I think what I'd ask you guys is just to inform the people who are involved in this legislation on how it affects Montgomery County and how it affects Montgomery County to hand transcribe each of these ballots.
Well,
And,
Lynn, one of the criticisms we have faced is that people will say, I don't subscribe to this view, but that the burden, the administrative burden on us shouldn't be a reason to deny people that option to get their ballot.
It's not just the administrative burden, it's the issue of being able to make sure that each and every vote is correctly transcribed and is counted as the voter has themselves verified it. And that's what makes
your
it
comment
so
about the
different.
voter never actually seeing the ballot is frightening.
Right?
A comment about that
We
on the
duplicated
duplicated
ballots for lots of reasons. I mean, we duplicate ballots not
And
just because
that's in
of online
reference to
ballot.
the use of the methods of duplicating the ballot if we're using the electronic process for that. But Montgomery County's procedures where all the ballots are being hand duplicated are, I think, an exception to
No,
that.
what
According to a
no,
PowerPoint,
no,
getting
what Lynn is talking about is hand
12,000,
Yeah.
948
It's
ballots.
either way, no matter whether it's hand
Okay.
duplicated or
Gotcha.
duplicated, the
Yes.
voter has never seen the ballot that's
Right.
the ballot that gets
But-
counted.
Right. Which has been part of the process for a very long time. I mean, basically, if there's a stray mark on a ballot, we often do duplication so that it goes through the machine.
But it's far fewer cases. I mean, we
Well,
do, most
right.
of ours are
It is
online.
It is fewer cases, but the voter doesn't see any ballot that gets
Well,
duplicated.
obviously.
Well,
that's
but
That's
that's
true.
but that's what I think what Lynn
It's
is
a
talking about.
you're absolutely right, but it's a volume of this. And when I've talked to people from other states, including the head of elections from Washington State, who has, as I said, 5 fewer of these, she just can't, it's staggering the volume that Montgomery County and other counties are doing on that.
Lynn, what is to prevent someone who gets an absentee ballot by mail from also, what is to prevent the hijacking of ballots for that process as well? In other words, if I can request the ballot online like I can now, and it's mailed to me, but I get to decide where it's mailed to. So I go online. I say my name is Jim Shalik. I have his address, his date of birth, and somehow or another his driver's license. I can go online and request that his ballot be mailed to my home.
That
Yes.
is exactly true.
And why is that any different than
Because
than
the
what you're talking
scale
about?
of it and the ability to detect it is totally different than having it done over the internet, where you can disguise where it's from and you can set up fake email accounts. So it's just a question of scale and level of difficulty. But you're absolutely right.
So, because you and I have talked about this issue many times, and if I understand your perspective, mail absentee ballots are also a security issue.
I'm not at all suggesting we change that. I'm just saying it's
Right,
because
but the difference
it's
is
a huge difference in scale. I mean, all the states have mailed absentee ballots. That's not where Maryland's different. Where Maryland is different is in terms of allowing all the ballots to be delivered online, and that's where the computer security experts have the problem with it.
Right, but what you're saying, you're mixing two things here, because on the one hand you're talking about security, and on the other hand you're talking about what other states do. If mail absentee ballots are a security issue in 50 states, it sounds like that's...
I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all.
But you didn't say they weren't.
No, I said...
You said that the scale is different, but that there's still an issue with mail absentee ballots. That there are security issues associated with those, but your argument about that was not, oh no, we can solve the security issue. Your argument was 50 states do it. And I agree. I don't want to abolish absentee ballots either. But I think that every form of voting that we do has a balance between convenience and security. And so the question is, where do we see the appropriate balance between convenience and security? You and I don't see it in exactly the same place. But if we were to do away with mail absentee ballots, which I do not advocate.
I don't think anyone's advocating
I
that.
understand. No one is advocating that. But if we did that, our voting system would be much more secure. We would have people showing up in person, and in person, you would have it'd be much harder for someone to hijack someone else's ballot because they'd have to show up in person. And There are some people who think, I'm not one of them, that we should have IDs in person, and that would make, even more secure. But again, there's a convenience factor for that as well. Not everyone has a photo ID, et cetera. Every method of voting has a balance between security and convenience, including mail absentee ballots.
That was her
David,
point.
you're knocking down an argument she didn't make, though.
No, she did.
She has not said that if we eliminated this, we would have no security problems. She never said that.
No, but she said we should eliminate it because of the security problems without dealing with the convenience issue that is a significant issue for a lot of
The scale. She was talking about the scale. And it's a very cogent argument. The scale is much higher than with the other states, is what she. I hope I'm correct.
We have many more mail absentee ballots than we have online delivery ballots.
And in your packet, Jessica was going to do a presentation
on legislation.
We'll break down the number of ballots that were duplicated, the number of hours that it took.
Yeah, let's revisit this when we get to legislation.
I don't have this. Do I have this in my?
Do you guys want?
I have one.
Lynn, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Lynn, I would like the record to show that I agree with everything Lynn said, and I think we should absolutely take this and be very careful with it and carefully look at this.
Do you want me to invite that professor from George Washington University, which is expert on computer security, Lynn, you know her, to come and explain to us what's going on?
Yes.
The security
We don't have much time in terms of the legislation. I mean, if we're talking about if we're going to,
they're only sitting for 3 more weeks.
Maybe we could have a special meeting where we invite her next week or something.
I was just saying, she testified at the hearing, so you could
right, she did.
Testimony.
She's expert.
She was pro or con?
She was for limiting the surface.
She's limited, yeah, right,
of the target by restricting it to the voters who
She's very critical of Maryland security issues.
Yeah, let's revisit this when we get to legislation.
She can come. I mean. Okay, go ahead.
Was there only other public comment?
Voter services.
That was it? Okay, election director report.
Okay. Margaret asked me to state for the record that the reason last month's meeting was canceled was because the wind caused a tree to fall into a transformer, and so we actually had an electrical outage here that was, it lasted several hours, so it's unfortunate we had to reschedule the board meeting, cancel the board meeting, but that was the purpose of it.
Yes,
just a reminder to all of the board members that the financial disclosures are due the end of April.
Sorry, what did you just say?
Financial disclosures.
The ethics.
Due by the end of April, the ethics form. Hilberto, would you mind standing up? I just want a round of applause for Hilberto because the Future Vote program, he is quick to share the credit with everybody, and there's lots of credit due to lots of people, including and especially with the school system and our election judges and everybody. But we were one of just a handful of winners of an award from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission for the Future Vote program. And so big kudos to that. That was 2 years ago. We got the same award for our precinct performance report that we do, and so we're actually one of very few 2-time award winners for that award. So
well done.
That's a nice feather in our cap. Margaret also asked me to alert you all that the EAC has asked her to serve on a working group talking about disaster preparedness and recovery, and so just want to note that to all of you. And also, Chris and Leslie, if you would both stand up now, too. We have another round of applause here. Leslie has one more conference to go to. Chris and Leslie have completed their requirements for their certification to become a certified elections registration administrator. And that's it's a 12-course program. It's quite a commitment that Montgomery County makes to send staff to become SERA certified. So they'll get a little CERA on the end of their business card, and so that's another round of applause for them. That's a program the Election Center administers with Auburn University. And we've got several other staff members who are in process for that as well. And then Margaret also wanted me to note to you all, although Hilberto may talk about it in more detail in his report, I'm not sure, but They went and spoke to the East County Citizens Advisory Board about some of the questions about the lines that we had at Fraser on Election Day. And I was not there, but my understanding is that it was a good discussion. I'll leave it to Gilberto to talk about that in his report, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Great. For personnel, the budget position with the board was advertised. It did close. We have the resumes, and we're beginning to schedule interviews now.
Did we get a lot of applicants?
I don't see how, maybe I can see how many applicants we got, but we've got
Just roughly, yeah.
Yeah, there's a good number of applicants. I'm not sure exactly what the number was. The budget was unveiled by the county executive on Friday. As the board knows, we are in a tight fiscal situation. What I'm circulating right now, and was out on the table as handouts as well, is a copy of the relevant pages from the county executive's budget. The budget is affected by the news that we will not be implementing the electronic poll books for the 2020 presidential election, and OMB is aware of that. We've been in contact with them, as this is sort of a live situation as to when we're going to implement the electronic poll books. There are some cuts, which, as the board knows, we are generally taking from some of our shared line items with the state for things like these electronic poll books, and so we'll give you a detailed line item spreadsheet as we always do next month. But this is hot off the presses as of Friday of the county executive's budget.
Are we going to discuss the issue of the poll books in a later section of this?
It's in one of the reports, I think.
Is it state? Is it under?
Jim,
the
I'll defer
state?
to you on how you want to handle that. You want to
State
talk about
board
that now,
elect-
or you want me to move on?
Is it under, I would think it'd be under the State Board of Elections, no?
Okay. So it's the next issue, I guess.
Well, then I'll just quickly.
Coming up.
Jessica, do you have anything to report on voter registration?
Before you get to that,
Yeah.
While we're still on the budget, if we have suggestions for things that have budgetary impact that we want to discuss, I guess the question is this the time to do that, or is that under new business?
You mean things you want to add to the budget, or?
Correct. Things that we've discussed at this table that have budgetary impact, but that may not be reflected in the budget.
I guess now is the time. If they're budget items.
We didn't deal with it when we.
No, we
No,
didn't.
these are suggested budget additions.
Here's what I'm talking about,
Okay.
rather than just trying to categorize it. We had a very interesting presentation at our January meeting about the dozen precincts in Montgomery County that have 1 hour wait times or more. And Margaret, I think very eloquently spoke to the need possibly for both personnel and equipment in order to address those dozen precincts so that their wait times would be less than an hour. And while there are some of those that are in some parts of the county, I believe that they are spread out. I don't remember exactly where all of them are, but that was in the presentation we had in January. I would guess, we're going to the county council before we meet again in April, before our board meets again in April. I would guess that they might be quite amenable to doing something to address those wait times to get them more in line with wait times at other parts of the county. And we've said that we thought that is a priority. And Jim, you said it very, very directly in January. So whenever it's appropriate, I'd like to suggest that we make that suggestion to the county council in time for that April. I forgot the exact April date, but in time. In time for that April discussion, so that they can consider it if that's possible.
Don't we have to make specific suggestions about what it would take to make the wait time less, like more of this or more of that,
Probably.
or another? I mean, if we do that, it's got to be Margaret's got to be specific.
I would agree that we'd be much better off and much more likely to be successful if we were to come in and say, here's how much we need and here's what we plan to spend.
Use it for, absolutely.
But I would say that I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. I think that saying nothing in April would be far more detrimental to us in solving this problem than having the lack of a complete plan. I mean, I think that we even discussed in January what some of those things would be that would help address those issues.
What do you remember we suggested? I think Margaret talked about line management.
She talked about additional judges. She talked about, additional scanners.
Right.
I think it's possible, I know there's a difference of opinion, but it's possible that a fix to the ballot marking devices could help. It's also possible that, I don't know if I don't remember if this is part of what Margaret was discussing in January in terms of whether we have precincts that are too large, and whether that would make a difference one way or the other. We haven't had a chance yet to, as a board, say here's what we think ought to be done, because we just had the presentation in January. We didn't meet in February. But the budget is, our chance to influence the budget is coming up now. So I think that it makes sense for us to do something now.
Well, David, and I just say I had suggested to Margaret that it may be beneficial to the board to write a letter to the county executive and the county council outlining all the new things that are going to need to be implemented in 2020. Same-day voter registration is a heavy task, but is much more doable when it's at early voting sites where we have our most experienced, our highly skilled election judges that are there for 8 days.
And only at 11 places.
It's only at 11 places. And when you have to start adding election judges to be able to handle same-day voter registration in 230 or 40 polling places, people that don't do this but once or twice every 2 years, that's going to be a heavy personnel burden and training burden and everything else that goes along with it.
Exactly.
And I just simply suggested that it maybe wouldn't hurt to have the board remind the county executive and the county council of all of the new things that will need to be implemented with this new election cycle.
Well, it sounds like we have two different categories then, because obviously managing our lines to get them to get the wait times down is not. It's not necessarily new, although there may be some new things we need to do in order to do that. For example, it might be that if we were to do some additional education for the voters about the differences between early voting and election day voting, that may also help some of our lines in the places that either are in early voting centers or are near early voting centers. But I think it's, I think a letter like you're describing would be very helpful, and it sounds like this may be the time to do it. I should add that we haven't had a discussion about the electronic poll books yet.
No, I haven't.
But if the electronic poll books, if we're keeping the same electronic poll books for same-day registration, that sounds like that's going to make same-day registration that much more difficult than if we had new electronic poll books for same-day registration.
David, that was a question I had, is the fact that we have the old-fashioned, if you will, or outdated poll books going to make, in addition to registration, same-day registration, are the poll books going to make it more difficult or more complicated or longer?
Well,
the old
it's a little hard for us to say, since that's kind of up to the way the state decides to go about implementing this. But the bills that have advanced in the legislature, they have removed the language about changes of address, so that if someone is at the wrong polling place or someone wants to cast a ballot and they're just not on the list or not on the right polling place, if they are not in the precinct, then it's going to be by provisional ballot. A change of address will be just the same way as we do changes of address right now. The reason I say that is because I think that basically makes it possible for them to proceed with same-day registration without new whiz-bang poll books in the polling place that would allow everybody to be networked.
Does the poll book reflect the people who live in the precinct but have not registered to vote previously? I would say yes. The answer to that is no.
So in the poll book, you can see the statewide list. You can't check them in to get a regular ballot, but you can see if they're in the wrong polling place.
Right, but what I mean is that as I understand the legislation, The legislation says that if you're in precinct, if you go to register same-day registration in precinct where you live, you vote on the regular machine. You bring proof of residence in some fashion or another, but you vote on the regular machine. If you vote out of precinct, then you get a provisional ballot, which you would if you vote out of precinct anyway.
Right.
How can you vote on the, how, I don't get the mechanics of it. If your name's not on the poll book, how can they spit you out the sheet that gives us our ballot? How do they do that?
It's the same way you do it at early voting now under same-day registration.
That was a list provided by the state, wasn't it?
But you'd
a
also
pre-approved
now,
list like.
the state still is contemplating that you'd have to have connectivity with the state system, right? So if you have to have connectivity in every polling place, you need to put an antenna in every polling place to go ahead and be able to go ahead and interface with the state. I mean, that's a huge financial number.
Right.
We talked about that.
Right.
Should we ask?
These are really questions for the state.
Should we ask the legislature to delay this till we get to the new poll books because it's going to make it so difficult and much more expensive?
I think that
Give
would
us
be difficult.
Yeah.
Very.
Well, I'm not asking
Very
about the
difficult.
difficulty of it, David. I'm asking about the wisdom of it.
The protocol that we're following at early voting right now for same-day registration, to my knowledge, unless anybody on the staff knows better than I do, I don't think anybody else does that. The sort of pre-qualified list of people that we check, that's kind of a Maryland-specific thing.
Right.
Where they're doing same-day registration in other areas of the country, they don't necessarily do that. They don't necessarily have their poll books networked. I don't know what the thinking is with the state board. Clearly, I'm not completely confident that they won't still see the need for the poll books to be networked, but I think there are certainly people in other counties who are assuming that the changes in the legislation would allow us to proceed without the poll books being networked. I can't speak for the state to say that they see it that way. It's kind of a live question right now.
To answer your question, Jackie, my own view is that we are far more likely to be able to use the approach of same-day registration to get resources than to use resources to prolong the arrival of same-day registration.
Well, I'm speaking mainly about the poll books, using very outdated poll books to try to do something this with this magnitude seems to be ridiculous. Now, what about when do we expect the new poll books? What is
The letter from the state said that it won't be till the next election.
Yeah.
Although I found it odd, one of the things that I saw reading that, I realize we're jumping from subject to subject here. One of the things that I found odd about that is that usually if a contractor tells you they can't do something on time, you try and find another contractor.
well, I
That's the state
Well,
government moved that
hasn't this
direction.
been-
Yeah.
I think that's exactly right.
They did it before with
We've been down
software.
this
Remember
road.
the naming same page? And then they said they cannot do it?
I understand. I'm not suggesting that we haven't been down this road before. I'm just saying that the idea that, contractor presents something, state board says not acceptable, and the answer is, oh well, 2 more years. That just strikes me as, no, you come up with a way to do it.
The definition of insanity.
I think the priority now is to get this budget request to the county executive and the county council.
So we'll put together a...
Yeah, do you have...
Let's put together a letter.
But isn't the county executive still proposing to cut our budget by 4% for fiscal 20?
Oh, 2%. Isn't 2% they said?
This is Margaret.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Margaret.
I do want to point out that when we were in deliberations with the budget staff, we did tell them over numerous times that there was the possibility of these networking, which was estimated at $1,000 per precinct. Plus, we accepted that we would have to have additional equipment to accommodate the number of individuals that were going to be increased with the number of with the implementation of automatic voter registration as well as same-day voter registration. So, and you need to remember that in the primary, only the Democrats and Republicans are going to vote. The non-affiliates don't. The only ballot they get to vote is the Board of Education ballot. So you're going to have a different number of people voting as opposed to the 2020 general election. So, while we have already notified the state that we expect to make a request for additional equipment to accommodate the interest in the primary, for the 2020 budget year, we will have enough equipment. Let me rephrase that. We'll have enough voting equipment to accommodate an outstanding turnout by both major political parties, but we will definitely need additional equipment for the 2020 fall election.
Which will be fiscal
additionally,
2021.
We need to address the poll book issues. When they took the money away out of the budget for the quote new poll books, I told the state, I told the county, Rich Madaleno specifically, that they had to restore the poll book funds because now we would have to commence with sharing poll books and printers or replacing them to be able to do our job. And so there was that switch made.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, if we could
We'll
do
work
a
up a
workup
letter.
and get it to us so we can.
Yeah, our budget does go before the council April 11th at 2. So we'll
The
work
full
this in
council
the
or
meantime.
committee?
The committee. And so that is the budget. Jessica, do you have anything on voter registration?
So at the beginning of the month, I emailed for the last 2 consecutive months the full report out to everyone of the number of registered voters. As of today, though, we have 717,025 active and inactive registrants. And we just completed our work on the ERIC report, which is the information exchange with, I think we're up to 22 states and more being added on. So we just finished that on Monday.
About how many people do you work that are Maryland concerned do you work with on that? Do you have any idea how many people in Maryland are taken on or taken off because of ERIC?
So the way that the ERIC is processed under the laws of Maryland, which it can vary state by state, there is an agreement that the states enter into with ERIC, but our specific state laws, we don't do removal of voters. We use it as a confirmation trigger. So if somebody's
A confirmation of
trigger, that we send them a confirmation notice. If the ERIC lists an address that's different than the address that we have on record for them, then we'll send them a confirmation. And if the voter responds, then we'll update their address. If they don't respond and they live, the ERIC address is out of state, they will become inactive, subject to cancellation after 2 federal elections.
But they could vote in 2 states, theoretically, I guess.
I mean, theoretically. But again, it's really used as for a list maintenance.
Is that checked against if their absentee ballot is requested against the actual the vote?
So if the voter requests an absentee ballot, they become reactivated. So they become an active voter again, because then that's a proactive measure from the voter where they have to provide us a current address. So if they request an absentee ballot by any means, whether paper, electronic, or otherwise, in person, then they do have to provide us a residential address in Maryland, and therefore they would become active again. Even if we
Now, if they did that and their name appeared on ERIC as out of state, what happens?
So, for instance, we have a voter who has a timeshare in Miami and a grandchild in Miami. So she bought a little car because she goes down there every other month. She's retired, and so she registered her car. Well, MVA registrations are one of the sources ERIC uses. So twice a year, we end up with her on the ERIC. We send her a confirmation to this address in Miami, and she calls and says, "Don't you remember me? I don't live in Miami. I live in Maryland. I just split my time there." And so I have a little car that stays in my timeshare. It's registered there.
About how many people do you get, names do you get through Eric?
So there's numerous
Approximately.
components of Eric.
Through all of Eric, about how many Maryland?
So if you include the national change of address, which is the postal service, that's the bulk of it, which we could end up with 18 to 20,000 names. In the regular Eric, which is state-to-state comparison of lists, it's under 10,000, closer to usually 5,000. There's also a component in that they're within the state of Maryland still. And so...
And what it costs us is put into this budget.
It is a agreement with the state. They were one of the
So
founding
we
states,
don't
so
pay
I have
anything
no
at all in
idea.
Montgomery County.
I have no idea how the breakdown of what the grant funding was for it for however long and how it all
That's all I want to know is Montgomery County doesn't pay anything toward this.
I don't know if we do or not. If it's part of our state building, I don't
I'm
know.
sure
the
we
answer.
pay under the table.
I don't know how it was funded.
You know, one
Okay,
of those.
thank you.
Jessica, of the 717,000, how many were active?
I don't have the as of today active, but I can tell you what it was. So at the end of February, for the February reports, there was 716,636 total registrants, and of that, 50,017 were inactive, and 666,619 were active.
Thank you.
For the State Board of Elections item, the first thing that we'll just let you know is that we have a new procedure that we have introduced. Everybody here in the staff who works in MD Voters now has a token that we've received, and we have a code that we get that changes on that token every few minutes, so that when we, or seconds really, when we log into MD Voters, we now have to enter in the code that was just sent to our little token as well. So yeah, we now have two-factor authentication for MD Voters. That's a new thing that we've implemented.
Is it gold one?
This is a security
Is it
measure.
gold coin?
That's
Is
statewide?
real gold?
It's not gold, no, and it's not a coin. It's a little fob.
Is it statewide or countywide?
Statewide. Statewide. We have also, Margaret wanted me to flag for you that we have both monthly state and county procedures that staff need to follow, mostly checking to see that we actually know how to tell a email phishing campaign, all the things to check through security training.
I have to do that. Does anybody else
Right.
do
What do I?
Right, you were
I'm being tested.
you were
every
emailed
month.
the test.
Yeah.
Janet,
You should be getting an email saying you have to go in.
Because you
I've been doing it. I've been taking
Saying we
the
have
test.
to do what?
Jim, they don't trust you.
What do we need to do?
You know? Yeah, I've been doing it.
What do we need to do?
It's like a 10-minute.
We've
It's like a
had
10-minute
some-
presentation.
On security?
And then they give you a quiz.
you were all sent the link.
On the
Whatever email address the
I
county
couldn't
has
get
on
into
file.
it.
We've had a little bit of an active discussion over whether you
cannot
need to
imagine.
take it or not.
You couldn't get
I
it
cannot
either?
imagine how many
I didn't
computer
get it.
security
I didn't get it.
online tests I have
Did you
taken.
get it?
I know.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
I'm
does it come
unclear
from?
about whether you really
When
need
did you
to,
get it?
since you
A
don't
month
log
ago?
into our
Who
computers.
did it come
but,
from?
State. You said the state.
Yeah,
The county.
I might
That was
have deleted
county.
it before I looked at it.
Oh, it's the county? Oh, okay, the county.
County will have sent it to whatever their most recent email
It's
address
like a
was.
10-minute
I couldn't figure it out.
presentation, and they give you like 4 or 5
You think
questions.
it's not a fraud? It's actual.
Yeah.
Janet?
Okay.
I called them and said,
From
what
the
is
I
county,
didn't know it was for me.
and because you all have active emails on the county network, you have to take it.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have a
I can
payroll user ID.
inactivate your,
Got it.
No, you saw
Accounts.
You
I'm
say on
doing
the
it.
county
Your
network.
password.
How
Because you have a
on the
payroll.
county network?
because you
I
go
know that. I called
into
them.
Payroll.
single sign-on to get your W-2s or wherever.
Oh, I see.
That's
Don't you
your
have?
on the
Don't
county
you click in to
network.
see your pay stub?
Yes,
Okay.
That's why I couldn't get
I
in.
got it and I
Yes.
In my pay stub.
So you have to
Okay.
take
I see
it,
when I get paid.
or they
I'll
will
visit you.
Because this
inactivate
was
your
in
I'll plug
account.
into the
I
county.
don't think I got the thing, so did
Oh,
you?
okay. Then
I
you
don't
may not have to
remember. I
take it.
have to check.
I mean, I haven't
Well, I
taken
do
it,
anyway.
but
Oh,
I
do you?
I
Do
didn't
they?
send it.
We
Like
get,
I see what you pay, every 2 weeks. I just see what was deposited. But you got to go in the
what
county
is
pay-
it, W-2?
payroll.
Yeah,
That's why I get one.
I don't do
So Jim, when you were in there, did it say send my absentee ballot to Wolf Tree Lane?
if you
I'm
have
not going to check that. You know?
if you have any problems getting your
No, I
W-2,
got
let
it.
us
I
know.
know.
We'll help you out with
I
that.
was going to do that. I was
Help-
a
help
great
out
place to test to it.
We already discussed the poll books. Margaret did have a note in her director's report. SB is going to start the procurement process again. It is our understanding that they're going to go out for bid on this, but we'll
To other people besides
on poll books.
On the poll, so they're no longer going to deal with the ES&S?
But for 22? Because
I don't
that
know.
wasn't in the material that we received in advance.
This is my understanding. I don't know
Can Margaret fill us in?
what the details are
What was
beyond
that?
that.
What
I don't
was
think,
it?
I mean, the last conversation that I had with folks at the state, I don't think they're focused on the 2020 presidential election, and they're not focused on doing a procurement of electronic poll books for
Seems
until
to
the
me
2020
that we should
election.
request.
About the ballot marking device.
How long does it take to design, engineer, and do the contract and make the poll books? One would think that an operation as such as the state board would be able to do two things at one time.
State board to start
Well,
with.
this has been going on. I mean, they have been discussing the poll book and
My point.
They're
That's
just
my
aren't
point.
that many.
Thank you.
They
That's
did
my
not
point.
I mean, why
they did
is
not do
this-
good
this is the
negotiation.
same
That's
No,
what
I
it is.
understand.
That's the
That's
problem.
Brought
the
that back
point
on.
I'm
the
making.
problem.
Back in the discussion again by raising that.
it's futile to just sit here and fume over it because that's all we can do.
But if they are going out with new bids, I think that's a positive sign, because I think otherwise they're literally saying, never mind 2020, it's already the beginning of 2019, and we can't do it in the time we have, which is, I agree with Jackie, they should be able to do more they should be able to plan for 2020 and 2022 at the same time.
But we are not the only customer there. Think
Yes.
about the amount of recourse they have.
So in the meantime,
I'm not defending
You're
them.
talking about ES&S, or you're talking about the state?
No. State did a mistake. I don't know how they negotiate with these people. Remember, we asked for put it all in one page. They say we cannot do it because you didn't put it in the contract.
Right.
State did not negotiate good with this group to start with, and they're taking advantage of that.
Right.
And just getting this delivery thing and putting the program together, it's not that easy. They have to go through security. They have to go a lot of things, and we are not the only one requesting that. So
Right,
it is
but I would love
indirectly
us
is the
to be
fault of
requesting that.
indirectly is the SBE fault.
Right, but do we have any indication that it's even being requested at this point? That's kind of what I mean. The best hope that we have is what Allison just said, which is that she thinks she's heard. I wasn't sure exactly how specific you would be. That they are considering putting it out for bid, which to me sounds like it would be a good idea, because if somebody else can do it faster, let's hire them. I mean, not
But
less.
they're
It's not us.
But they're still only talking about 2022.
Yes.
Which is, is,
Right.
I guess, one step better than waiting until 2021 for them to tell us it's going to take until 2024.
All right, let's put into action what we're talking about. Could we?
Margaret.
talking.
Yeah, I just want to add, temper, I guess maybe, some of your thoughts in terms of what the concerns of all of the statewide election directors, and that is that there is a possibility that, long shot possibility, that there would be a procurement process that could be expedited. But the concern of the directors is that whatever the winning bid would be, it would need to be in the hands of the election directors and their various personnel by September of this year. And so that they would become familiar with it, go through all of the acceptance testing, which Janet can give you all the background on that. And then we have to get our election judge trainers up to speed on the new equipment so that we can introduce it to all of our election judges in January, when I expect we will start training for the April primary. So that's the timeline is what's the killer on this new procurement of the voting equipment. And then the state normally will not change equipment from the primary to the general. And there's a lot of practical reasons for that because of the number of election judges we're working with. And it would just be a nightmare in terms of trying to switch out. So Allison is correct. We have not heard confirmation that they have initiated the procurement process. but we've heard all sorts of informal communication that the state is looking to begin the RI request for information, which I believe is the first step of the state procurement process.
So, Margaret, when you say that there's a possibility of, or at least there's not an impossibility of a procurement that's in time for the 2020 election, what is it? What
I
is?
don't even know how that would happen.
Right.
I don't know how a procurement, a request for information to develop the request for, it's a different term, for bid, would be accomplished between now and for delivery. I mean, and then you have to think about you're delivering not just to Montgomery County, which is a huge client all by itself, but for the entire state of Maryland. Nobody has that much inventory sitting around.
I would like to suggest that we ask the state board. I understand 2020 is out of the negotiation, or the I mean 20, not 20, yeah, 2020. 2020. I see no reason why we can't send a letter to the state board, Mr. Attorney, and ask them what the timeline is, what their plans are, how they're going about this. We're deeply concerned. That why not ask them for a literal timeline of when it's when is the bid going out, what are they asking for, and who are they asking? That we are the most concerned people in the county, in the state, and I think we have a right to know what's going on. They're public officials, supposed to have some public disclosure. Let's ask them, not just put up with tidbits of conversations that are coming back from them. What do you think?
I mean, you're talking about their plans for 2022?
You putting that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
I'll second.
I move.
Good idea.
Can we not specify the year and just ask them what their plans are?
Sure. Just let's find something out and not sit here and spend lots of time fuming over something we don't know anything about. We can fume over stuff we do know about then.
In the meantime...
Well, there's a motion and a second.
Yes.
Any discussion?
Marion,
no, but this would be for, would Kevin draft something?
I would ask Kevin, I would think to draft something with dot points, 1, 2, 3, 4 questions about who it is, how they're doing, what's going to be on it, what's it all about. Let's get some really bedrock information.
Okay. I'll get a draft in.
Yeah.
and this
There was a
stage
motion
is
on
too
the floor.
late for
There-
I don't think we need to
Yeah.
vote.
I seconded, yeah.
Well,
she did.
Kevin's
We
going to
got a
do it.
second.
Okay. This
Well,
is
there's a
stage
motion.
too
We have
late.
There's a
to vote.
motion
Okay.
on.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
This stage is too late for 2020 to do anything.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
In the meantime, Janet and her team will continue the post-election maintenance on all of the machines that we currently have in-house, and finish up the inventory and repairs to the physical booths that we've going to do some repairs to those.
Is it stupid to buy more poll books like the ones we have?
They don't make them anymore.
Yeah, they can't buy
You
them.
can't buy them.
I know Margaret's always got her eye on
That's
you
old
know, who out there's
technology,
got
Alan.
some available.
She requested it. She requested an additional 100 and something poll books.
I think the idea is that you have extra in case they go bad.
So, Alan, my understanding, and I could be completely off the mark, but I think there is a state that has transitioned away from this particular poll book, and I think Margaret is exploring the opportunity of perhaps purchasing some of those.
Orphan equipment.
We try.
Purchase or lease? Purchase.
That I don't know.
Okay. Purchase.
Somebody has old one, they're going to get that from because they don't make a new one of these particular.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Who owns those, ES&S or us? Or the state?
State.
We don't own anything. You all just pay for things.
Right.
The county pays for it.
Yeah, we don't own any
Sounds
of
like
the
my
equipment.
children.
So, as you all know, we were required by a recent law to do a manual hand tabulation of ballots, which we did in a couple of precincts, which we did on February 4th, and uploaded those results to the state board. On February 5th, candidate filing began for 2020.
How were those results, by the way? How did we do with that?
We were fine. We were clear. It
The hand
added
count
up.
matched perfect?
Everything matched perfect, right,
Yeah.
Janet? Yep.
Perfect.
Few mistake, 2 voting mistake as well.
Has
And
anyone filed?
the only other item on Margaret's list was that, just to let you all know, that she is going to be going to the state board meeting on March 28th. They asked her to come talk about some of the fallout from the way that the bulk update and the missing names and what the state provided us, and then the way that we chose to go ahead and handle that. And so Margaret's going to go talk with the state board at their
David, I didn't
request.
see anybody file.
What day of the
March
week is
28th.
that?
Are they suggesting that we did something that we shouldn't have?
I don't know what they're suggesting. I just know that they asked Margaret to come speak.
Margaret, do we know why they asked you to come speak?
Yes, they, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, they were not pleased with the manner in which I implemented the missing, to manage the missing names. And I did prepare some remarks with regards to, that basically said what I told the board, and that it was more or less ridiculous to expect our election judges to compare anywhere from 10 to 40 names with every individual that came before our election judge, and to determine if they were on this missing bulk update data list. They would have only added time to the waiting, and it was just unacceptable for Montgomery County.
So instead, what we did was we updated our list before the voters showed up, so that when they showed up, that information would already be reflected.
That's
Right.
correct.
You mean on a paper
And
list?
that was, that
Yeah.
decision was made with, I consulted with Janet and Leslie on what's the best way to implement this for our 900 to 1,000 election judges.
How can we support Margaret in going before the state board? Because it
Well, I
sounds,
think
it's
Mary Ann and Jackie are coming.
Yeah.
Aren't you?
I will be at the meeting.
I will be at the meeting.
right, but I'm wondering whether we should either take a vote or do something that indicates that, I mean, I personally agree with the idea that asking people to check a list every time a voter shows up is far less efficient than the way that we did it, and the result is the same, right? I mean, either way, it got updated.
Well, the way it worked was that if they didn't show up in the book, then they checked the list? Is that?
Well, she had the list already done when they walked in.
Right. I believe that the way it worked is that originally what the state wanted us to do, and tell me if I have this right, was if they're not in the list to check the other list. Whereas what we did instead was updated the list so you check one list, which I think makes sense and saves waiting and makes it less likely someone forgets to do it. And I mean,
Oh, so we updated it in the poll books then?
yeah.
We
Oh.
checked them in before polls opened, and then we checked them out
We
afterwards.
updated the information in the poll book before the polls opened. So the data that was allegedly missing went into the poll book, and then afterwards, or before the polls closed, we gave them another instruction. I'm sorry, I'm working without notes. But then during the canvass process, we reconciled all of those names. But we did not involve the election judges,
Right.
which was the most important piece.
So I'd like to move that we go on record today as approving of how Margaret handled this situation.
I'd like to second it.
Yeah, she has our full support, absolutely.
And would you like this to be communicated by us attending
Yes.
the
Yes.
meeting
Yes.
on behalf of Margaret?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's full support of the board.
Yes, but I mean, let's vote and then we can say.
Was
what
it
the vote
seconded?
was.
Yeah.
Was
Yes.
it
Those
seconded?
in favor?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So it was a unanimous 7, everybody.
The next topic
Yeah,
is
sounds
legislation. We provided the list of all of the bills, all the elections bills that have been moving fast and furious. The bills are crossing over today, I believe, is the crossover deadline, and so there's a lot going on up there. I will leave it to you all to decide if there's any bills that you have any questions about. I do have one. I just got a text here begging me from one of our colleagues up in Carroll County. There's a bill, House Bill 569, to allow local boards of elections to hire people who are not Maryland registered voters. And so Carroll County has been trying to have the ability to hire people who live in Pennsylvania for years. They've been pursuing this. We would be the other ones that come to mind often, that we would then be able to hire people who live in Virginia or D.C. if this bill were to pass. So I was asked to please bring that to your attention. I don't know if the board has a position or wants to take a position.
Do we know why the requirement exists?
The law says that all of our employees have to be Maryland registered.
And they probably don't have enough workers.
Why should we care if they're registered voters here if they do the job we want them to do?
Well, we don't have a problem with that, do we?
It would be a matter of whether this board wants to send a letter supporting Carroll County on this bill, or they're asking us to take an action to help support there.
But it will only affect Carroll County.
No.
Statewide
Will
bill. Statewide?
It's
Okay.
a statewide bill that's not moving.
I have a mixed feeling.
I have very mixed feelings about it. Somehow I think people that live in the state are going to be more likely to show up if there's a rainstorm, more if they live in the county that they're working in.
But they
or
don't have to
nearby.
live in the county that they're working in. They only have
Well,
to
live in the
They only have
state
to
at
live in the
least.
state
That
and
live
be
in
a
the
registered
state.
voter of the state. So if you are a precinct in Bethesda, someone in Northwest Washington lives much closer.
But I'm talking about loyalty, not driving time.
Well, don't we want our Maryland residents to get these jobs?
It's entirely a matter for the board to...
Voting is regulated by states. And I'm sure that's, David, were you the one that said what was behind this? I presume that, that's behind any of this regarding, elections, that you have to be, a resident of the state, blah, 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 blah.
If you all have mixed feelings, we can just continue to sit it out.
My suggestion would be that we remain silent on it.
Yeah, I agree with Jackie.
Although we have
judges.
a very, very big issue with judges, and we're talking about needing lots more of them to deal with the same day registration.
But what we need is Republican judges.
No, if we cut the hours, we will get more judges.
Exactly.
Instead of they come from 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock. If we have 2 shifts, so we can get more judges.
I agree with Jackie. I would prefer to stay silent on it. That's just my own opinion.
Any other legislation items? Or
Well, let's see. Want to go back? We said we'd go back to what the bill that Lynn was talking about. Do we want to?
What is that bill number?
That is 706.
Where is it? Is it
Right,
Senate
Lynn?
bill or House bill?
House Bill 706 and Senate Bill 919.
But don't they have to cross over today?
706.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, 706.
What page is it?
It's the second page, close to the top.
So we talked about it before. There was some concerns about the last paragraph.
Well, the last category of
The last category.
entitled to request an online.
Opens it up a whole lot more to what Lynn was saying about the possibility of the more it's opened up, the more possibility there is of fraud.
That was not my concern with the last paragraph. That might have been yours.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. My concern with the last paragraph
706.
is that it asks us to make decisions for voters as to who is unable to vote if they could not receive an absentee ballot electronically.
Right.
And I think that would require a lot of involvement in people's lives that perhaps we don't want. But I will say my own view is that there has not been. I mean, there has been no fraud shown. There has been a lot of people who clearly want to use this method of voting because we get them. These folks are, live in Montgomery County for the most part. To me, this is no different than the question about the Potomac Early Voting Center. Its popularity is not a reason to do away with it. Its popularity is a reason to try and make it work. And I think that every voting method is a balance of security and convenience, and that there are things that can be done to make this more secure. It is not going to be, before Lynn tries to raise her hand, because I know that she's going to disagree with me, I'm going to make very clear, I'm not suggesting that this is a perfectly secure method of voting. I don't think any of our methods of voting are perfectly secure methods of voting. I think that there's a balance to be struck, and I think that clearly there are tens of thousands of voters in Montgomery County who view this as an important way for them to be able to vote.
But David, so you're saying that you think under the current circumstances it is worth the risk to security?
I'm saying that I think that I didn't say it exactly the way you said, as I'm sure you know.
But would you agree with me? Is that how you feel about it?
No. How I feel about it is that we should do more to try and lower the risk. But that I would not do away with this any more than I would do away with U.S. mail absentee voting for people who are younger than me, which is an increasing number of people every day. There's a lot of people who are much more comfortable by receiving their ballot electronically than by receiving it in the U.S. mail. We all know from our own experience at this board table that U.S. mail is not reliable, that there are plenty of instances where people have asked for their ballots by U.S. mail and they did not get them. And so, once again, if we're going to push everybody to get their ballots by U.S. mail, but we can't guarantee that they're going to receive them, I think there's a big problem there as well.
I think the more we can do to reduce fraud, the possibility of it, the better. We don't need to widen this unknown area any more than it already is. I think that would not be necessary with all the other methods there are to vote. I think we should keep it, that portion of it should come out. We should recommend that portion.
We're not widening anything. This is a proposal to narrow it. This is something that we've already been doing for several elections.
This narrows the eligibility.
But it would return it to where it was before 2012.
Yes.
So it's not like it's unprecedented and we've never done this before.
But how much does it reduce it? I mean, is it a meaningful reduction?
Well, Jessica might know that.
It depends on how they design the interface and how voters interact
my
with
view,
it.
I hate to pull back on opportunities to vote that people already have. You know what I'm saying? In other words, it's out there for certain people to use it, or anybody to use it, really, and to pull back on who's eligible.
But Lynn's comment about we're the only state. Am I correct, Lynn?
No, we're one of three.
One of three that uses this method. Says something to me. I would love to hear what this woman who's an expert at GW has to say before we make any comment about this legislation.
Well, what instances of fraud specific to Maryland do we have as a result of this? Are there numbers on this?
It's a good question. It's not a question of individual fraud here and there. And we don't know that, as far as we know, no fraud has been detected. But we know a system similar to this in Alberta, Canada, had widespread fraud. So it's a question of whether we're even able to detect it. And what the computer scientists are saying is that this can be done in such a way that it's very hard to detect because voters.
Lynn, can you come over here so we can hear you and record it?
Because
Thanks.
voters' credentials are widely available over the internet. That's why it's so hard to prevent fraud this way. And as you know, in Maryland, we don't check signatures on ballot return. So
Why don't we? Wouldn't that add to security?
That's a whole different issue. I believe that's an issue that...
It's not a whole different issue. It's a security issue. We should be checking signatures. Why don't we? I mean, I know the law doesn't provide for it, but that would be a good example of an additional step that the state could take that would make things more secure without doing away with a system of voting that tens of thousands of Montgomery County voters are using.
David, there's a trip to Annapolis for you in that one.
Just what I'm looking for. Alex. Just what I'm looking for.
May I suggest, in terms of the voter convenience, the most significant part of voter convenience is that voters can request their absentee ballots using the online tools. That's what really makes a difference, making the voter convenience.
May I suggest that that is your opinion, but that I know lots of people for whom being able to get the ballot in this fashion and having to rely on U.S. mail once and not twice is a significant convenience for them. Because if under the system you're talking about, you can request it online, which you can do now. You can request it by fax now. There's lots of different ways to request your ballot now. But you have to wait for U.S. mail for your ballot to arrive, and then you have to rely on U.S. mail for your ballot to arrive here on time. And every election, have both people who don't receive their ballots that are mailed to them, and we have people who mail them back, and we don't get them. Either don't get them at all, we don't get them on time. And we've had lots of stories about mail that sits on a shelf in a post office somewhere. We've had lots of experience with how U.S. mail is not necessarily reliable. It's reliable most of the time.
Not much, do we, Jessica?
We've had a lot of latecomers.
Do you know offhand?
Well, sometimes it's because someone postmarks it after the deadline, but I don't know.
But
you may recall that we received an inquiry from Councilmember Katz for a family of 3 people where they requested their absentee ballots all at the same time, and one of them received their ballots and 2 of them did not.
Well, one family out of 736
No, that's only the person who came to us.
Hard case.
But we have numerous. Over the years, we've had numerous instances.
The percentage is not that high.
But isn't this bill going through a vigorous debate in the legislature with testimony and everything?
There has been testimony, and that's why I said you could look at the testimony that's been in the legislature.
I mean, is this something best left for the elected legislators to?
I think what's important is that if Montgomery County can provide information on how it affects Montgomery County, I think that would be.
Well, it affects us because it's a pain in the neck. However, that shouldn't be a reason.
It's not.
It also affects us because 10,000 voters use it.
No, I agree.
Or more.
No, and to me, it seems more like a political / legislative decision than, we just administer the laws that they tell us to administer. I'm just. Any thoughts on that? I mean, we're not a legislative body.
Well, the fact that we don't have a problem. Talking about what could be, it's out there.
Yeah,
it looks a little sketchy. But bottom, you've heard me say this to any number of issues. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I just don't. I'm not getting the sense of.
Well, read the scientist's testimony and then decide if you think that's the right
No,
approach.
you're bringing this up. It's very important. We appreciate it. It's just.
Does it look like it's going to pass?
No.
You don't know?
No.
She didn't say she didn't know. She said she's not going to
comment on that.
Oh, okay.
I'm not an expert in that area. Sorry.
I think I would defer to Jackie's last opinion about a legislative issue and stay silent on this one.
Okay. Just be quiet.
Does anybody have anything else on that?
No, that's it.
No?
We had enough debate.
Okay.
I just have one matter for open session. We have a couple of things for closed session.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry.
No.
Is there any other legislation?
I didn't know we had anything for open session too.
We finished.
I think that I sent you a copy of the Judicial Watch, the state's cross motion for summary judgment, and a brief letter summarizing what the cross motion was. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer it. But stripped to its bare essentials, the state's position is that what Judicial Watch is asking for is not material that would be covered by the National Voter Registration Act.
What's your view on that, Jim?
You want to stay now or hold it?
My view is I find it very hard to believe that everything that's in MD Voters is outside the National Voter Registration Act. That's kind of my take.
I got you.
But I've been wrong many,
Right.
many times before, so we'll see.
Right.
Judicial Watch has asked for a 30-day extension because they had someone leave, which was granted by Judge Hollander this morning, so there's going to be probably another 60 days of briefing and then probably another 6 months or so before a decision's reached.
Now, where do we've been dismissed, but
Montgomery County
they can
is-
appeal when, in other words, there's no final judgment. Can they
Right.
appeal our dismissal at some point?
They could, once a final judgment's been entered, they could theoretically appeal that to the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit.
So they could appeal our dismissal once the case is resolved with the state board?
Correct. That would be a pretty futile thing to do.
I don't think they will.
Because the substantive issue that they really wanted to have the court address is before the court. And so they're going to get a ruling on the substantive issue.
Okay.
Thanks.
Old business. Is there any old business?
Well, I think that the minutes feel like old business to me rather than we have new business taking
Well, I think,
care of the old
well, the
business.
new business,
All right.
it's the new,
It's coming.
it's coming.
Right. All right.
Old is
I wouldn't
old,
mind doing
old.
it under old.
We've talked about it so
We
much,
can do it
it just
under
feels
old or
like
new, it
old.
doesn't matter.
I don't care.
So you want to
Doesn't
talk
matter. You wanna do it now?
old business?
Okay,
Yeah.
old business.
Mary
Mary Ann.
Ann.
Mary Ann, old Mary Ann for old business.
And Jackie.
Let me pass out.
Man, you're going to start with
Can I
the theory
just
of
make a
this.
staff request? And only because I am looking at the clock and I am looking at the number of staff reports that we're going to need to give, and so in the interest of, and I'm fine with it if you want to proceed with this, but we do have a number of staff who are here who will be going into after hours the longer the board meeting goes, and so if this becomes a lengthy
We wanna
discussion,
do it new
then you might consider holding it until after the staff reports. But
Can I make another suggestion, which is having just been given this document, that perhaps we can have time to think about it, talk about it, and vote on it next month?
Boy,
No.
I won't be here next meeting.
And,
you won't be
we'll have a
Won't be
discussion,
here.
on it when it comes up. If you want to put it under new business, I mean, but it depends how late things go, because I'm not going to be here late either.
Why we don't talk
Well,
about
she-
But it's up to the-
because the staff.
Okay.
The staff
Let's,
clock, they wanna leave it
staff
fine.
can
This
go
is not, this is
if-
not
if-
new
if-
business, first of all, so it is appropriate to bring it up at this point, because we have been going through this for months and months, if not years and years, with talking about the minutes and the amendments to the minutes and the length of the minutes. And we talked among ourselves. We also had a very excellent presentation from the League of Women Voters regarding this issue, with a suggestion which sort of became the basis for when Jackie and I started talking about it and saying, could we come up with something to help us instead of going round and round all the time? And one of the other things we did was to request from Margaret examples of what other boards of elections do. And in fact, nobody has minutes. No other board has the length of minutes and the depth of discussion that our minutes have. That being said, we have, in addition, and I don't really know what the other boards do in terms of having the audio tape, but our audio tape is put up online within 2 or 3 days of a meeting. It goes up very quickly. So, as a result of the suggestion that came from the League about couldn't we take the agenda from our meeting, which is out in advance and it's perfectly updated the day of the meeting, etc., and anything that we might add is done, at the meeting, and request staff at that point, following the meeting, to simply go through the tape and put on the agenda items the time of each agenda item on the agenda. You know, print the agenda, put the time that it's on the tape. The tape is going up in 3 days. That could go up along with it, so that somebody can readily go right to the audio tape and listen to any particular part of the agenda that, you know, captures their interest. It's done quickly. Then the minutes could certainly be greatly summarized. Now I'll pass along. I'm sorry I didn't make copies of this, but let me pass around for people to just look through and see the type of minutes some of these other boards have. Some are just as brief as little bullet items. I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but the others that are much more reasonable are just a little outline of the discussion, a very brief summary of the discussion. And if there's an action item related to it, it's sort of bolded that, you know, the action that was requested. I just really think that, you know, making better use of our audio tape, I know that it is extremely difficult and nobody wants to go through, other than David, who does it a couple of times each month. David doesn't want to do it. But, you know, to just go through from beginning to end, not knowing where the item you're interested in is appearing necessarily, you know, can be troublesome. But I think to be able to pinpoint for each item the time on the tape, and then you can go right to the tape and pull up that time frame and listen to, you know, the debate as you like, is a way to, you know, arrive at a resolution to this situation.
And David, this was the germ of this started with you, David. When you complained that people couldn't go right to the tape and find what they wanted, they had to go through the whole thing. And I think that was a cogent comment. And this solves that. And I think that it will work very, very well.
Lisa, mechanically, is that something that you can do?
Mechanically?
I mean, is this something that can be done?
Yeah, sure. Sure, anything can be done.
Okay.
Well, it's certainly a lot quicker.
Can you pass those to
Yeah,
us too? Yes, thank you.
To do the initial type of thing with the, you and I were talking a little earlier, you know, going through the tape, just to, you know, not listening to the whole thing, because you don't have to do that, you know, to pull up, it starts at this, and then, you know, where it ends.
Yeah,
but
I'm for bullet.
I think it'll save you a lot of time in the long run too. Now, of course, you are still going to have to go through the tape and do a brief summary, but not with every, you know, who shot John type thing.
Mary Ann, were you suggesting that maybe on some of these agenda items that there might be a little bit of a sub-detail below certain things, or is that what you were talking about? Or
no, I mean, because I think our agenda does give subcategories.
Right.
And I just think the times can be put on that. Then, after the fuller thing is done, at the end, the next month's meeting, when the minutes are approved, et cetera, the minutes themselves would also contain the next to it the time on the tape. And there might be some additional items at that point. But I think that this really, you know, gives up. Jim, people are...
Oh, Dave, and then Al.
I move that we postpone this discussion until next month, and I would be happy to give my reasoning if there's a second.
I second it.
Any discussion on that?
Yes. Clearly, a lot of thought went into this proposal, but none of it included consultation with all the members of the board. We were just given examples of individual minutes from individual boards, not all of which are boards of elections from around the state, without any indication as to, without any opportunity to review them. This is not an old business item. The first time we've seen this proposal is right now. At least the first time I've seen this proposal is right now.
You have debated this issue ad nauseum.
Exactly.
Excuse me, but I have the floor at the moment, and yes, I have insisted that our minutes should be accurate and that our minutes should be complete, and that they should include the necessary statements. In the case of the minutes from January, we had a very direct statement as to who made the decision that poll workers could not store materials overnight at polling places, which is of great importance to a lot of people. And without the changes that we made to the minutes, that would have been left unsaid. There's lots of examples every month of things that are added. There are often follow-up items for the staff that are not recorded in the minutes. Were not recorded specifically in the minutes. There's lots of occasions where the minutes are not complete enough. Anyone who thinks that time stamping the agenda will allow people to find what they want to find in our deliberations has not listened to any of our recordings from start to finish. Our meetings are not that linear. We had a meeting today.
I'm sorry. Our issues are not what?
Our conversations are not that linear.
Linear. All right.
In the sense that our agenda says we're going to talk about something, and oftentimes other things spill into that, as happened earlier in this meeting, where we started talking about the state's electronic poll books, and we weren't on the State Board of Elections item. So if somebody is looking for a particular discussion, if they go to the agenda where it says State Board of Elections, that's not where the conversation takes place. There is no substitute for that. But in any event, my motion right now is simply to allow, I don't know whether Alan got this in advance, I know I didn't. I know that it was handed to me when Mary Ann was recognized and said she had something to present here. And while it is true we've discussed this subject before, this particular proposal, already printed up but not given to us, I would also add that
I sat at my desk and did it. This is not a huge.
Well, it's like a written motion. I mean, it's no different than that.
Yes, right.
Well, yes, but we also adopted, not that many months ago, as our policy that the materials that the board is going to discuss at our meeting would be distributed in advance. And this was not in that category. Are you saying that last Thursday you didn't know you were going to do this? Because that's when our materials go online.
That was materials from the staff.
I did not. This did not go to staff last Thursday.
Okay.
I guess.
So
I mean, if that's my failing.
How did you procure the copies of the other minutes?
Pardon me?
How did you procure the copies of the minutes from other boards?
I requested them from Margaret, but she didn't. She hasn't seen this.
Okay, whatever the case,
She didn't see this.
it is impolite to both your colleagues and the public to come to the board table, to call this old business, and to put it to a vote right away while waving in our face a motion and a bunch of minutes from other jurisdictions.
All right, that's your judgment, not the absolute about it being impolite. That's your judgment.
Yes, that's my judgment. I just told you my judgment. I consider that to be very impolite, and I would think that we would all benefit from having a conversation that all of us could fully participate in.
Al?
I'll second what you said, and my understanding was that we would get in advance of meetings substantive things to think about and to vote on. When David had a proposal with about 5 or 6 different items like this, he put it on the table, we thought about it.
A month in advance.
And then the next month, it was considered. But let me add some factual points here with the minutes we just saw. Anne Arundel County minutes. The meeting was 1 hour and 10 minutes. Baltimore, 1 hour and 3 minutes. The other one was 1 hour and 2 minutes. Our meeting, the last meeting, was 3 hours, 3 times as long.
For no good reason, probably.
Yeah, that's right.
No meeting could be 3 hours
Take
long.
away everything you said in that meeting? No, everything we all say here is important. And I've been all in favor of being transparent and complete. no one has said that what we did, our last minutes here were incomplete or incorrect the way that Kevin and Margaret and David and I amended them. They are complete and they're accurate. But to the point of the motion, it's really untoward to present something like this right here at the last minute like this. That gives you a chance to think about it.
Alan, I think that to your comments, we're not for one moment suggesting that the minutes that are recorded be changed in any way whatsoever. I think we could, and to David's comment, and I think we could put, when we do not have linear conversations, those times could also be added to the same time could be added several times, so people could know that there was more than one.
It would require more work than what is now being done, because it would require...
Not overall, we don't think so. I think it would be a much more complete...
In order to know every time in this meeting that we've discussed electronic poll votes, someone will have to then listen to the entirety of the recording and figure out all the different points where electronic poll vote was substantively discussed.
Maybe we should ask the person who's going to do
Yeah, Lisa
what
does
they
that
think.
kind of thing.
I have plenty of experience knowing what that would be like. It would require her to make those judgment calls several times, several times every month about what gets included in that category or not. I will say this, Jackie, if you just said that you're not suggesting that the minutes be changed in any way, that's not what this says.
We're not suggesting, I said the recorded minutes. No, very careful. We're not in any way suggesting.
You're not suggesting the recording be changed in any way.
Thank you, I'll accept that.
You are suggesting that the minutes be changed.
The printed minutes.
Well, let me say this. In the past, we have tabled things that have just come up, and I agree with David and Alan that this is an important issue, and we should vote on it at the next meeting. It's just my view. In the past, David's raised things and we put it off. I think it's fair that we have two of our members that want to consider it and present more of their position. So I don't think it's unreasonable to table the vote till next month. And if somebody can't make it, we can call in, but I agree with David and Alan.
I have one question as to the motion here. Is there provision in this process for board members to review and edit the minutes? I don't see what that is.
Do you mean the written minutes that will come out?
Yes.
Well, it would be the same as it is now.
That process is
that process would be the same.
Yeah.
All right, Lisa, unless there's people want to vote on that, but my suggestion.
We have a motion on the floor.
The motion is to put it off until next month.
And is there a second?
Yes.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So how many do we have?
You have to ask who's opposed because he doesn't
I
vote.
won't be here,
Are you
so I don't have any opinion.
Okay. She's abstained. So it passes.
Thank you.
So Lisa, put that on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Congressional, no,
No,
we're going to do the report.
Staff reports. So I will beg that we hold questions until
the
each
end.
staff member has completed their presentation.
Yes.
And then we can do questions. So first we'll have Leslie go ahead and give the election judge and recruitment presentation. Let's hold our questions until Leslie is done. And then once we're done with questions for Leslie, then we'll move on to Hilberto and on to the agenda.
Hold your applause too.
Hold your applause too, please.
Don't thank your parents and your director.
The Academy.
These are the
Good one.
What goes first?
Leslie is we're going to go in the order of the agenda. Leslie's going to go first, election judge, training and recruitment. Then Hilberto, then Chris, then Jessica.
Well, then outreach and future vote program, media and advertising, operations, and voter registration.
Yeah, but they're merged. They're not
Just
two
naming the stuff on the
presentations.
agenda.
Yeah.
Worker program, is that what this is?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and B and C are merged presentations into one.
Do you take a few minutes break?
Do you mind swinging around? So you can
Oh,
put the-
sorry.
Okay. David, we're going to just swing you around. So
Okay,
that-
sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You tell me where you're going to be, and I'll stay out of your way. I can be here.
You go over there.
Okay.
You'll be there.
All right.
Okay. Good luck. Okay,
I
so,
was
okay, so this is a report on the election worker program. My team and I are responsible for basically 4 phases: recruitment, training, assignment, and service. Okay, so we'll go through there. So we're responsible for recruiting election workers, poll workers, typically around 4,000. The number varies by election. Margaret sets the requirements, and that's her part of it. She determines anticipated turnout, the state's forecast, and gives us the numbers of folks that we need to recruit. We recruit all year round. We are forever recruiting at outreach events, online, through various sources, in conjunction with the outreach team. Training is required by state law. The state requires that we have a minimum of 3 hours of, in-person, hands-on training. Okay. Our training also includes a prerequisite, if you will, which is an online quiz. It covers the first 4 chapters of the state's election judge manual. And so that is a preliminary for them, so that when they get to the in-person class, they've already understood and learned what we consider the basics for election judge service. Okay. Assignments, we don't make any assignments until training is completed. Okay. Otherwise, I can tell you it is a waste of time. Okay, you train folks and they drop, you've got to go back and start all over. So it's a part of the commitment to the program that individuals understand assignment comes once they've completed their training. Service, we are providing individuals for both early voting and election day. We also have a large number of individuals that serve in the nursing home program and assist with the canvas. Our staffing, our personnel for the general election included myself and 2 full-time recruiters, permanent staff. We had 31 temporary staff, 6 recruiters, 3 for election day, 2 for early voting, and a part-time floater who assisted with both. We had 2 receptionists or clerical support, 2 training support, and a total of 21 trainers. 16 of those were full-time, 5 were part-time. We'll move on to recruitment. Our base was about 3,000. Those are the number of individuals that come back every election cycle. It does not mean they're available for every election. Some folks are primary folks. Some like doing the general. Some would love to do it, but hey, I've got to go out of town for work. So that's our base. We recruited an additional 2,857 through applications for the general election. You can see the majority of those came online through our website. The other 30% came from outreach events, high school being the largest, and then a small percentage come through the mail. Okay. If you see the asterisk, the italics says 32% of our recruited workers were unavailable. Our drop rate in 2016 was 50%. So it is getting better, but we are still spending a lot of time recruiting, training, getting people in who ultimately are unavailable. And those unavailable reasons are life. You know, your job says, no, you can't have the day off. I need you to come in. Family responsibilities. So we don't compete. Okay. So we are getting better. The individuals that we're getting are committing to us, but that is something we have to deal with. Okay? That's a nationwide problem. So I just got back from a conference in the end of February, and that was the big question. How are you getting them? How are you keeping them? Everybody's struggling with the same issues. Our primary application sources, high school outreach, the election worker interest sheet, and that's the sheet that's filled out in the polls election day. A lot of individuals sign up to work. And then we do a quantity of household mailers. Okay, outreach, we do events, community events, county events. We do several at the college every semester, and we do the high schools. Those are our most effective source of recruitment. We also have press releases that go out every 2 to 3 weeks. Unfortunately, they tend to be very limited in their effectiveness because we're relying on media to pick that up and carry it forward. And until we get, 6 weeks before the election, there's just no interest. Nobody's paying any attention. We do send them out, and we do get some, but not as much as I'd like. Cable programming, the county has been very helpful in spotlighting us on a variety of cable shows. For the general, we did the Mosaic program. I can tell you that they replay that every week, sometimes over and over. I can tell you because people kept calling me saying, I saw you on TV. I'm like, oh my God. But it was good. We did see an uptick in applications, so for that I thank them. The other, we do targeted postcards. We send postcards to all of the individuals that check off on their voter registration application that they're interested in knowing more. The State Board of Elections has an application process if voters are interested in serving, and they send us a list usually about every 2 weeks, every week as we get closer to the election. So we contact and follow up with those individuals. We sent a little over 1,000 between June and October. We also sent 1,600, a little over 1,600 in August to those folks that signed the sheet and the polls from the primary. So we reached out to them. And then our biggest mailer went out to Republican voters across the county in September, almost 10,000, asking them to please serve. I can tell you that that mailing was our least productive.
Republican.
Yes. But we're going to keep trying. All right, our workforce by age. We have done very well in bringing down our average age from 50. The national average is 72. With the induction of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, our high school program, our under 25 average is 16%, which is substantially more than the national average. So, bringing in the younger workforce has been beneficial. Not just in bringing up our numbers, but in the polling places, our election workers they're doing better. The young people, they're not afraid of the equipment. They can move the tables and chairs. Some of them, are maturity issues. You got to keep them engaged. But we're really seeing a multi-generational workforce that is showing a benefit of being effective, getting the job done. Languages. We are required under Section 203 to have Spanish-speaking judges, so that's our largest group of language speakers. And then we also recruit the other languages to assist voters who English is not their first language. So French, Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese. We have doubled our Korean and Vietnamese numbers since 2016, and that directly relates to our high school program. by party, I'll break down by party. So, majority of our election workers are Democrats. We are seeing a trend of the number of unaffiliated going up and the number of Republicans going down. So, fighting that. Training. So, as I said in the beginning, our training program is 2 parts. Stage 1 is where they take an online quiz. They're asked to read chapters 1 through 4 of the manual. The quiz is related directly to that. They have to read it and answer the questions correctly. The quiz is available online 24/7, so they can do it when it's convenient to them. They can come into the office and take it if they choose. And we do have individuals that choose to do that. The fail rate is 5%, 95 passed. Applicants that fail, probably 80% of those, because they didn't read the chapters. And that's not just the high schoolers. We've got other folks who figure, how hard can it be? Well, unless you do elections, it could be a little tricky. So once they go back, and we do give everyone an opportunity to retest, they typically pass. Okay? We do have a very small segment of individuals who are unable to pass because of their language skills, their English reading skills. And that's one of the requirements to be an election judge. You have to be able to read, write, and speak the English language. So we do have a small number who cannot meet that requirement. But for the most part, we're pleased with the numbers. Okay, so stage 2 is the in-person training. For election day, we trained 3,535, early voting 539. We have 3 locations that we trained from for this election. Our offices here, we have multiple training rooms. We were at Montgomery College on the Rockville campus, and we were at the Silver Spring Civic Building. Both of those off-site locations are given to us free of charge, and also meet our requirement of being able to secure the rooms so that we can leave the equipment. The majority of our judges are coming here. We try to do the down county because getting up here in traffic is a challenge. So we will hopefully be able to find some other locations for the 2020 elections so that we can continue some off-sites. We do a training evaluation, or we offer a training evaluation in each class. We did that, and our response to satisfaction was 94%. So most of our judges are feeling that they're getting what they need from training, and they're feeling prepared and capable of doing their task. Assignment. So our initial requirements for early voting is 2,016. What we actually signed is 2,258. The difference there are the changes that Margaret made based on turnout, those increases that she saw on each day, the number of voters coming out. We sent out additional staff. We recruit a large number of standbys, particularly for early voting, because you've got to be able to respond very quickly. And so that's the change that you see. Election day, initial requirements, 3461, actual assigned, 3479. Again, Margaret will tweak those based on what she's seeing in activity and turnout. Service. So for early voting, for our 11 sites, we had a total of 487 individuals that served. They filled 2,258 positions, most of them working an average of 3.5 days. Election day, 3,393 number served, 174 in the Spanish-speaking position, 49 in the chief provisional or voting ops were also served as or fulfilled the Spanish-speaking requirement. And then we had 86 no-shows, which is horrible, but at the same time, very good, percentage-wise. So we had a total of 101, but we were able to send out 15 replacements on election day.
Leslie, did you not know they were going to show up? Did anybody say, I can't,
No,
they just didn't
all
show
of
up?
these are they didn't show up. The ones that we know about and that we can do something about, we do. But these are actual election days, and they just didn't call, didn't come. So this is a breakdown of no-shows by position.
Is this connected?
Hold on.
So the largest number of those were in the voting operations category. The chief position, that was filled on election day, so we were able to get that filled. We had 13 Spanish speakers not show up. The next highest would be closers, 10, and VOP provisional, which are provisional judges, 8. The others are a bit smaller. And Nahid, you were talking about part-time positions. We do have part-time positions. So if you see here where it says a VOP-A and the VOP-B, that's the split position.
For judges.
For judges.
They know that?
Yes. And that's available both election day and early voting.
Oh.
Are they half days?
It's half of our day.
Right, it's 8 hours.
Yeah.
Instead of 16.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. It's part-time for us, not quite.
Is there a limit on how many of those there are, or is it just basically you have to have 2 of them to add up to 1?
No. We try to have a balance of an A and a B.
Right.
There are some precincts where we will have multiple A's to handle the morning rush.
Right.
So, and they may not have a corresponding B.
Okay. But it's no longer the case that somebody has to commit to the 16 hours in order to help us. They can
Correct.
They can apply for one of these.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
All right. Feedback. After early voting or during early voting and on election day, voters complete the voter comment cards. Okay. And so my team pulls that data together. And so I'll go through early voting first and then election day.
Which one is EVO7? That's not mine.
Okay, so we got comment cards from a little over 12% of voters. And actually it was like 14,000. Overall satisfaction is 95%. So where did you vote is the question. From the group that responded, the highest were EV6 and then EV5. Okay.
Which are what?
6 is Borough Park and 5 is Silver Spring.
And what's
Damascus. Leave a little guy. Okay, which day did you vote? Saturday was the most popular from the respondents, followed by Monday and then Wednesday.
Do we know how that compares to the actual data as to when people vote? Because these are the people who filled out comment cards.
Yes.
But I thought that
different.
I thought that for the end of the week we have many more voters than at the beginning of the week.
Yes, it is different.
I'm gonna ask. We've got like 8 more slides to go through. If we can just hold the questions until the end.
Okay. Next is how did you arrive at the early voting center? And this was a new question for this year. Previously, we had not asked that. Majority arrived by automobile or car, followed by walking and public transit. Is this early voting center convenient? 80%, almost 90% said yes, they like it. And these are the other questions. 90% said it was convenient, 94 said it was well run, 96 felt that election workers were welcoming, and 96 also felt they were helpful and knowledgeable. Election day, we got 3.7 comment cards or responses from voters There were 15,400 actual comment cards were received. Overall satisfaction rating is 93%. How did you arrive at the polling place? Again, majority arrived by automobile. What time did you vote? Majority were between 7 a.m. and noon, and then another uptick between 5 and 6 p.m. And the other questions, 91% felt it was well run, 93% felt it was convenient, 94% said their polling place, the election workers were welcoming, 94% said the election workers were helpful and knowledgeable.
And now we can do questions.
Oh, very good.
Well done.
Very thorough, yes.
Thank you.
I just have two quick. In terms of recruiting more Republicans, would a up-county training site be helpful?
No. We actually had training in the primary at Damascus. They gave us a week, and we were unable to fill it. We had classes 2.5 days, and it was just, it was maybe we had a total of 30 people.
So with the imbalance you show us between Democratic and Republican judges, don't we have to have two different parties at every polling place, correct?
We need judges with two different party affiliations.
Right.
Independent.
So
what do we do? Or you take,
we're using other judges, individuals that are registered as other, could be Green, Libertarian. We're also using unaffiliated.
Are there
We do have a goal of having at least one Republican in a precinct, preferably in the chief judge position. But if not, we have them in another all-day position. But it is very, very difficult.
Jim, wouldn't there be other locations other than Damascus that might have a larger number of Republicans? Because it seems like Damascus is going to have low numbers no matter what party. Like Potomac or Germantown.
Potomac Community Center.
Right. I mean,
well, I mean, you talked about attaching party to training.
No, just making it convenient
to recruit more Republicans.
But bear in mind that it's only 125,000 Republican versus 700,000 Democrat and Independent. So that counts. They don't have that many Republicans.
But it does seem like having. I'm glad that we do the off-site training in different locations, and it may be that if we expand the off-site training in other locations, we'll be able to reach out to a whole bunch of groups that we don't currently reach.
On recruitment, tell me what household mailers are.
In this here.
That's the breakdown here. Okay.
Those are the household mailers.
You said that.
We send them to the Republican voters. We send them to.
So you just take the names off the voting list, or off the registration?
We do an extract from empty voters. We look at the precincts where we have little or none Republican judges, and target those precincts, and we do an extract and do a mailing to those individuals.
I know that you said you had manpower, you sent it to places they didn't have enough. I was one of these precincts, Whitman High School, I know, is it 1023? The chief judge was begging for more people because they didn't have enough. The students, the volunteer students were doing registration, a scanner and all of them. So had very few had. They said they requested, but somehow, I don't know what happened.
I will tell you that the 7th is our most understaffed district.
Okay.
It is, individuals are just not coming out to serve.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is hard to get individuals to travel over there when at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're not going to finish till 10 o'clock at night. So continue to target that area. But.
How are they paid? When they come to training, they get paid for training?
A little bit.
Training is included in the stipend that they receive. The stipend is sent by check 6 weeks after the election, 5 weeks.
So if they come to training and they don't show up to on
To
election
serve.
day, they don't get
They don't
paid.
get-
That's
Or they
correct.
don't get, that's
We
what I want
send
to know.
collection agents.
Yeah, come on, that's,
No,
they don't get paid
They have to go to
incrementally.
training and they
Yeah.
have to serve in order to get paid.
You
been
do
on
a
edge here.
great job, Leslie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, one question. Do I recall correctly that when the specimens go out with the sample ballot, is there a request for judges on that?
Yes, yes. There's a solicitation.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's going to upload it to the website tomorrow. We can circulate it too.
You stole mine. No, I'm joking.
Oh, good. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
She would do just what you give. Everyone is.
So 2018 Empowerment Overview. So as Allison mentioned earlier, we were recognized with a 2018 Clearing Award by the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. So thanks again to everyone involved in this process. Our components for outreach and empowerment. Outreach, as you know, we have an aggressive, successful outreach component in Montgomery County that's recognized across the United States and in Maryland. We did about 662 outreach events covering, leading up to both the primary and the general gubernatorial midterm elections. In the report that you received earlier, you have the zip code breakdown. We make a concerted effort to blanket Montgomery County, whether it's Poolsville, Tacoma Park, Silver Spring. We also look at the demographic trends, language needs. We connect the Future Vote families with our outreach team as it pertains to language needs, and also we're extremely aggressive as it pertains to outreach, empowerment, and election judge recruitment. Future Vote is one of our components. We had over 2,200 ambassadors serve this election cycle. 1,600 were middle school students, about 72%. 623, about 27% were high schools. Obviously, as they go through the program, they tend to focus on SATs and pre-SATs, AP classes when they're juniors, sophomores, and then they reappear as the gold election judge. This is the program, the component of recruiting high school election judges. Males is about 51%. It's about an even distribution, and also with females. We want to make sure there's an even representation in the program. For this election cycle, the students volunteer close to a little bit over 10,700 community service hours. Each student is required by Maryland State Board of Education to provide 75 hours of community service before they graduate from Montgomery County High School. Out of those students that participated, over 45% of the students identify themselves having bilingual skills. This is extremely important. At the precinct, they do buttress, where appropriate, our bilingual election judges beyond Spanish. These are the most popular languages that were covered on election day. So there's and a lot of these languages also reflect the community in which we recruit them from, and they also reflect within the student body. Our high school election judge component with Future Vote, we had 1,494 high school election judges serve, 733 in the primary, 761 in the general elections. It's been very fruitful. With the advent of adding 16-year-old, that number has increased. We're going to continue doing recruitment ahead of the curve. We know the presidential primary elections, we're going to do some pre-registration to get some of those young students in the pipeline. And so we're working that out with Leslie and her team. Public information. So we had a good coverage with the Washington Post, if you saw the article. Looking at our outreach recruitment team, they do an incredible job out in the community. They're well respected and they're recognized both, like I mentioned earlier, nationally and statewide. They do an incredible job. They do sacrifice their weekends, evenings. So I want to acknowledge them as well for all the efforts they put in our behalf and on behalf of the voters. Also, we did a lot of coverage on Channel 4 and all the local media, showcasing our Future Vote program. There's a good piece also online, and so we're going to continue to use that as a recruitment tool as we move forward, as we lead up to the 2020 presidential elections. Which was interesting, we had calls I received to the PIO office 22 credential requests were fulfilled, 14 by media, 2 of them were exit polls, 3 delegation visits, and 1 research and tabulation, and 2 election night results that were here in the boardroom. What was interesting this time around, I asked Leslie to help me get a copy of the sign-in sheet that we have in every single precinct and on the early voting. And we had over 244 individuals that visited our precincts, covering over 50 organizations in 89 precincts. So when I mentioned the 22 credentials requests that were fulfilled, that does not count these individuals. So when I looked at the sign-in sheet, that's a missed opportunity to identify these organizations and individuals. Talking to Leslie, this will help mitigate some of the issues with our chief judges because then they have to host these individuals. Some of these groups are big. They're up to 20 individuals. And they weren't the Argentinian delegations that historically visit us. This is a separate delegation from Nigeria and Angola. And when you look at the list, it was impressive. So we're working now ahead of the curve, contacting these organizations leading up to 2020. Because ideally, I prefer them contacting us early in the curve, and then it could give a nice even distribution to the board members to help us out to give those visits when they're at the precincts. Because when you compare 22 credentials that were fulfilled and supported by the staff and board members, doesn't cover the other 244 individuals representing 50 organizations. This is a little taste of the organizations that did not contact us. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, representing Australia, Denmark, and Switzerland, the Kenyan Parliament, Independent National Electoral Commission from Nigeria and Uganda. We got a couple of news agencies from China and Denmark, the United States International Center for Electoral Support, Voice of America, Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. So we've been in contact with them, looking forward to 2020. So as I mentioned, we're contacting them. We're working to get them ahead of the curve. Right now, we're going to work with Jan and her IT team to thinking of best practices, a way of these individuals to come and pre-sign up, similar to like Evite. And then we could get their information and credentials, an image of their ID, and then we could call them just to verify. And then it could be an even distribution amongst the board members and the staff, and we could evenly distribute the 244 individuals representing the 50 organizations. So we're going to do that. So we're going to institute that. That's a missed opportunity to kind of coordinate better with these organizations, and it'll mitigate and assist the chief judges. Because I know their preference is to serve the voters, and of course these individuals are part of the process, but it is time consuming. After reviewing the population shifts and language needs, looking at outreach, empowerment, recruitment, and also looking at these organizations that visited, we're going to add Amharic, French, and Vietnamese to our outreach and media efforts. Thank you. Any questions?
Do you know how many were in Argentine group?
That was a large, I think it was like over 20.
Senator, President's office, rep.
Yeah, it was, the Argentina delegation was a big group, but there was a lot of organizations that didn't contact us. Yes.
Terrific job. Have you tracked how many ambassadors became precinct co-workers later on?
I'm sorry?
Have you tracked how many people were ambassadors, student ambassadors, and they became
to track?
later?
No, that's one thing that we want to improve upon that. Because what happens is our Future Vote module, once these individuals are recruited and we promote them, they then submit an application. And we do collect high school and their source, but we don't have a specific one for Future Vote, and we're going to work on that.
We're lacking a link between the two modules.
The modules.
That will tell us.
It would be good if we have different all languages, not just things.
Oh, it's just a slide that I found.
Danish.
Yeah.
Persian.
We have other languages. What I'll do is I will email you. I have a breakdown of
I'll give you all
every
the thank you and all the languages.
Yes, this was just a highlight of the languages that were covered. Obviously with Future Vote, but there's a lot of, so these are like the bulk ones out of the 2,200. These are the more popular ones, but there's 150 recognized languages in Montgomery County. And we do have Farsi, that was one of the popular ones, but these are like the bulk ones, and it also reflects what the school system is finding as pertains to the needs in their school for their students and the families. So it's a good representation of what we see in the precinct, also what the school system sees at this classrooms.
What's this 2,200 you mentioned?
Oh, the future vote, how many future vote ambassadors serve?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and you're saying that among those languages.
Yes, we're covered. Yes.
Those children spoke that language.
Yes.
Enough to be able to help.
Yes, and we provide a checklist to the chief judge. So the chief judge, if they have a high school freshman who speaks French, but they don't have a French-speaking election judge, and there's a need for French interpretation, and if the judge feels after they meet on Monday, and they'll ask Tommy, you mentioned having French-speaking capabilities and talk to the guardian, but is this more than speaking with your grandmother, or is this like a fluency? So it's like, I'm fluent, and they'll make a note, so they know that they could ask the student to help. If the student says, well, I could communicate with my grandmother or help her when we go to the supermarket, then the judge will scratch out, will update the record, and then the chief will not leverage that student, and they won't see as appropriate a resource to help that voter in French.
But you said the percentage is 40-something%?
Yes, that they identify themselves having...
That's identifying themselves.
Yeah, themselves.
That's before you've done the screening.
Yeah, and keep in mind the guardians apply, not the student. The guardian is identifying their child having bilingual capabilities in that language. So the student does not apply because there's a first layer where they applied as date of birth, and there's a filter, and there's information that we collect of the guardian before we even collect information for the student.
So do you know how the numbers of bilingual students compare to the numbers of bilingual judges?
We haven't done a cross-reference. We could do that.
Because I'd be curious to know how much are we depending on the students?
Yeah, and actually a lot of the bilingual students who are promoted within the ranks do have leveraged the bilingual capabilities, especially in Spanish, French. And 7 major languages identified by the county government and the school system, then all the other multitude, especially American Sign Language.
Great.
I should point out, Gilberto's got some metrics on the advertising, impressions and things. That's in like the page 5 of his report.
Thank you, Umberto. That was
You were
very
excellent
good.
as usual.
Yeah.
As usual.
Uh-oh.
I can't see it. I don't see it here.
Oh,
There, it's gone.
huh? We're going to have these reports in the future. Let's put them in front of us.
Good
We're paying
afternoon.
them overtime.
We're going to review now
Put them up in front.
the functions that include operations. We have the 2018 review of election operations. And this was a group effort. I had several of our staff putting this together. We're going to start with candidate filing. That's one of the significant functions within operations. You'll make note that we were busy this cycle, 2018. We had 190 candidates. As a comparison, in the gubernatorial for 2014, 134 candidates filed. This is a list of the contests that we do file at the local level. There are several others that are filed at the state level. Our biggest change for this election was public funding for our candidates. And this elaborates on the election code. And I've highlighted, although the code is state code and it allows the counties to have their executive branch and their county exec be part of a program, a funding program, the county determines the criteria, but the program itself is actually managed by the state. We had 39 applicants. 25 qualified, that's 64%, and 14 did not qualify. They did not make the criteria. This is the criteria for the offices that we could fund. The county exec had to have a maximum of 500 donors with a range of $5 to $150. The aggregate was $40,000, and then it was reduced as we went to the different contests. Supply warehouse. This is basically a story in photos. We had 919,300 ballots ordered. That equated to a little less than 2.75 million pieces of paper. This is what the warehouse looked like when they started to deliver the ballots. Now we thought we would put this in. Once we're packing the ballots, it becomes a real production, and it becomes an assembly line. This is what it looks like when we're packing downstairs for each of the early voting centers as well as each of the polling places. Probably a lot of you were out at the early voting centers and you saw these cabinets. What we used for cubbies to distinguish the different ballot styles. This is how early voting was packed to go out. This is how our equipment black cards were packed. We used every space we could find. We even used the compartments of the scanners to pack ballots in. There were so many ballots going out. Then we went on to start preparing for early voting. Then the end of the night came. And this is election night returns. This is the next day. As we finalize elections, we start the audit process. So these people are the trainers. They're part of Leslie's staff, start to do the audit process. They're unpacking all of the bags to make sure that the judges have returned all critical materials and all reports that are needed for audit. This is return of equipment. We had Able as a new vendor. They had 33 routes, and each route had about 7 stops per route. They did well. We were lucky enough that the gentleman who was their project manager had worked for Kane in the past and had worked as project manager for us. So he knew of us and the process. So it really was a smooth transition for us. We don't have a photo of JK. JK was also new. They delivered the poll books. They had 16 routes on the day before election, and there were approximately 14, 15 stops to each route, and all the EPBs were delivered correctly as well. Polling places. As you know, we had our 11 early voting centers. We had our 236 polling places that served 258 precincts. Now this is going to be some redundancy, but we've taken the comment cards once again. We are talking about how did you travel to your voting location. As Leslie said, 90% basically traveled by car for early voting. The number went down for election day. You'll see that we have 83.1%. Then when we break it down to did you walk or did you bike, you'll see for early voting we had 7.8%. That just about doubled on election day to 15.7%. People chose to use a bike or to walk to their polling place. Then transit flipped. Public transit for early voting was 2.1% was used, and then about half of that for election day. This also talks about driving, and what I felt was interesting there, overall about 90% of the people drove. But if you look at EV2, which is EOB, EV5, which is Silver Spring Civic, and EV9, which is Lawton. Those three I consider more of an urban environment, and those people chose not to drive. Here we go again with convenience. This is early voting. 89.9, 90% were completely satisfied with the convenience of the early voting center. Early voting completely satisfied. This is going individually. And again, overall, as we said earlier, about 90% of the people felt that their early voting center was convenient.
Even praising her.
Well, and
They love Damascus.
Look at Damascus. I was happy to see Damascus. I said, go Damascus. They were very happy up there.
No lines. All
Oh,
three people.
yeah.
All three of them.
No lines.
How about San Spring? What was San Spring?
How convenient was your election day polling place? 93. We bump up a little bit because the locations are in their communities. And then we talked, as you'll remember, a little bit about ADA compliancy, the distance that some of our voters would need to travel to walk from the car to the polling room if they had mobility issues, was what we were particularly concerned about. So each polling place received this recommendation. The poster was two-sided. On the front was the message of voter rest area. On the back were the instructions to the judges on how they were to set up their rest area. And then each polling place was to set up this rest area with some chairs out in the corridor. So if someone felt that the distance traveled was too far, there was a place for them to rest. And I'll also mention that we have a new ADA compliance officer for Montgomery County. So she wasn't familiar at all with our process and our compliancy and how we set up ADA for the voters. She visited EOB during early voting. She was very pleased. She was happy to see what the things that we were doing to make the voter comfortable and making the location accessible. Polling place support program. We had some questions about that during our time between primary and general. So we put this slide presentation together to explain a little bit more about polling place support. The purpose basically began in 1994. The director at that point was looking at how can we help the election judges during election day, as well as how can we ensure that what is required of us is happening at each polling place. So the second and third items there, the bullet items, basically talk about the state law. That was also the motivator for this particular program. Now it is, after several years, has become a state mandated program. We have several components, a list of items that we have to check off. We have a gentleman downstairs by the name of Mr. Pena who assists our league and puts together the program. And our highlight, of course, is election day polling place visits. There, and part of the components, part of putting the program together, is the alliance that we have with the League of Women Voters and the county. We have a contractual agreement with them, and we talk during the process about fees and staffing and the routes that will be covered. And basically, we have training and debriefing. We set up training and we set up routes, and they cover the whole county. We have approximately 37 routes. Most members take 3 to 5 locations on election day to review. Part of the program is putting together all the materials that are needed for the workers that are attending the different polling places. We have workshops. We have specific legal instructions. We distribute and receive confidentiality agreements from each individual. Then their day basically begins at 7:30 and it ends around 3. They spend a good hour, hour and a half at each location, so they have really time to review what is happening at each polling place. At the end, we have a debriefing. We don't put them under a light. But they do share a lot of interesting information that we take forward with preparing for the next election. And these reports are specific for certain needs. Leslie mentioned that she's always looking to see what is happening out there with election judges. The reports go to her. And then the main reason for the questionnaire that's prepared by the state goes to the state for a state audit. Now, one thing that has been new for us this year is we headed the election help desk. We provided support for early voting as well as polling place. One of the items one of the functions that were used was to make communication easier with routine type questions. We used the software for Everbridge, and we would get responses, automatic responses from their cell phone. For the primary election, we fielded 354 early voting calls. And for election day, 492 election day calls. And then for the general, it was 492 for early voting, 723 election day calls. And that is all. Are there questions?
Excellent.
What election day calls? What were most of them?
Most of them, I would say, were equipment questions, policy procedure questions.
They're calls from the judges, not from the public.
Not from the public, no. Basically, Jackie, calls from the public are fielded up front. Jessica's group takes care of that. And then our portion back here in the help desk is to serve the polling.
And then are those questions funneled into when you train judges next time?
Yes, and there's different means. I know Leslie takes it very seriously, the questions that might come up. What we do on our side is that we accumulate them on spreadsheets, and then we go by one to make sure that we're covering whatever particular issue was, came up.
Thank you.
Good work, as usual.
Thank you.
When did the classes start?
I keep thinking it's me.
When do the judges' classes start?
We just had like one election.
For next time? It'll be in the retention.
You have to make an entrance.
That's right. Hand somebody Okay. Hi.
By the numbers.
By the numbers. So that's what I'm going to do. A lot of you have already seen the numbers, so we'll go through them and then we'll do questions. Okay, so voter services on focus areas are voter registration, absentee voting, and canvass of the absentee and provisional ballots. That requires, in this last election cycle, we had 33 full-time permanent, part-time permanent, and then temporary employees, which was down about 5 from what we would have like in a presidential election cycle. And some of that's efficiencies that we've gained also in the changes to our canvass process. As I said earlier, as of today, we have 717,025 registered voters. I will note that at the end of the year, the Libertarian and Green parties are no longer recognized by the state as minor parties. There are some rules and requirements that they must meet, and I know SBE just put out some information about that. So when you get your monthly reports, you'll no longer see the columns for those two parties. But we did add a new party, the Bread and Roses party, so you will see that on the reports.
What happens to those voters?
They become other-green, other-libertarian.
Why the Bread and Roses? They have more than the Libertarian and the Greens have?
It's they actually have to pass a petition, get a certain percentage of voters, registered voters, to sign a petition.
Yeah. And
then I believe the requirements are in the following two federal general elections, it doesn't have to be federal, state, in our case they are. They have to have a candidate of their party in the highest, running for candidacy in the highest position on the ballot, or they have to have a certain percentage turnout.
And so Bread and Roses hasn't been there yet, so they can't.
They get two elections to hit it.
Yep, get it.
So.
Join.
Just some registration transaction statistics. In the last election cycle of 2018, 50,185 new voters were registered, 57,717 address or name changes, and 5,605 voters who were previously inactive became active. And that was like you were talking about earlier, whether they voted, they did a request for update to their registration, they did an absentee application.
This was in calendar year 18?
That's right. At the end of the cycle, we had 33,432 inactive voters who had not voted in the two preceding federal elections, who were subsequently canceled. We processed in all 267,955 voter records were created or updated, and 154,413 of those were electronic-based records. Other activities, we visited 49 nursing homes as part of the nursing home program. We trained over 100 volunteer registrars, and we assisted 10 municipalities who also had elections in 18 with the information they needed to conduct their own elections.
The nursing home visits were to get people to vote.
So the nursing home program, as I detailed in my report, is a program where if a nursing home has 50 beds or more, we invite them to participate in a program where we actually send election judges to the nursing home with absentee ballots to help them with the completion. It's completely voluntary for the nursing homes to participate in the program. We send them letters, encourage them, give them several opportunities to get enrolled in it and take part, but it's up to them whether or not they want to. And then it's up to the residents of that nursing home if they want to participate. It's not for the staff or for the outside, it's just for the people, but we kind of bring a whole polling place to them. Chris covered that for the call center. For voter calls, in the 30 days prior to the election, we had 2,199 calls, which did not include the period for early voting or on election day. So early voting, we had 989 calls, and election day, 263. These are all voter calls, and this spans everything from all the way to election day, where's my absentee ballot, or did you get my ballot back, or where do I go to vote, what are the hours, what are the requirements, what do I need to do for same-day registration, and on. You guys might remember the recount we had after the primary election.
Yes, we might.
We handled 158,291 ballots in order to get prepared for the recount. Because the ballots are by party commingled in the bins, we had to sort through every one of them.
Wow.
Usually we sorted through the batches about 3 times to get the actual ballots out because we had to account for every single ballot, and we did. We ended up counting 38,199. About 20,000, I think it's about 14,000 of those were actually counted in both recounts. So we actually had to go back through and prep those again. And in all, it actually took 10,984 workforce hours. So that was staffing hours. By law, it can only be an employee of a local board that can participate in the recount process. So we could not utilize election judges. We couldn't utilize anybody outside, except for we did have, in addition to our 92 individuals who were employees of the board, we had 8 people from other county election offices who also came and assisted us in the actual recount process. so we were very grateful for their help. As soon as that got over with, we got into petition signing and verifying. So we had 3 petitions that came through that we verified the signatures for. The first and the largest, and these kind of were all commingled as they came in. 20,962 signatures had to be validated against the requirements for what needs to appear on a petition in order for the signature to be validated. 5,074 were for a nominating statewide petition, and then the new party petition was statewide again, and our share was 376 signatures. And that actually came in 2 phases, so because there was an additional pickup. Provisional ballots, this is for the general election. We received back 10,496. We counted 946. 1,050 of those were rejected. For those of you curious, about 850 of them were not registered voters. And so no same-day registration process. Those go into a not count category. Overall, though, about 90% of the provisional ballots were counted after the general election. We sent out 48,068 absentee ballots. We got a return rate of about 37,538. This is a little bit lower than a presidential return rate, but right on level with a gubernatorial. With the exception that in this particular election, we had an incredibly high absentee rate compared to 14. In 14, we only issued about 17,369 absentee ballots. So, and the return rate was just slightly higher.
Do you have any number on how many of the absentee, that 10,000 disparate, how many of those came in and voted on election day?
Provisionally.
Yeah, no, but I can find that out.
Okay.
That's a good question. I'll follow up. Our favorite slides, duplicating ballots. So, of the ballots that were returned, 12,948 were those that were electronically delivered to the voters, or they retrieved them from the internet.
That's for one election or both?
That's just for the general.
Okay.
And so our canvas teams, back to those workforce hours, 1,718 hours, taking their average salary, because again, we don't pay them by the ballot, so, but taking the average time, the canvassing cost was almost $25,000. In contrast, we had a little over 24,000 ballots that returned by mail. The canvassing hours, of course, were much less, and the overall cost also was lower. Which gives you the comparison. Looking at this chart, the kind of orangey lines are web, so you can see the web deliveries ranked lower in return, much higher in cost, where the ballots returned by mail, receipt versus processing cost.
Now you're looking at absolute numbers. Do you have percentage of return for web and percentage of return for mail?
I can provide it for you.
Thank you.
Questions? Oh, I wanted to also tell you, just so you knew, I included in my report that we resumed sending and processing applications for UOCAVA voters, military and overseas, and also receipt back of their ballots directly to our office versus to the state. So we sent out about 3,500 ballots, got back about 2,400 for military. And also just a small piece on kind of the postal service and what's going on with that. I know there's been a lot of questions even today about, do ballots get to voters? What's the status of that? We certainly work through a process undeliverable ballots that make their way back to us. We certainly get phone calls from voters asking, who didn't receive their ballot. We do have tracking abilities, so if voters do call our office, we're able to track the ballot and find out what happened to it. We also have the voters who show up at the polling place and don't even realize they requested an absentee ballot, kind of part of it. We also have voters who request a ballot now for 2020, and in the meantime they move, and they don't necessarily update their information, or they provide it as a mailing address that's no longer valid. These kind of all play into that. So we are kind of trying to take a couple of different approaches to addressing the issue. We have asked the state to first go back to the online voter application, which also includes the ability to request an absentee ballot and make sure it's more clearly spelled out to the voters so they don't accidentally request an absentee ballot when they think they're just registering or updating their registration. We've also asked the state to add inbound ballot tracking to the future contract for vendor, when our vendors are being selected to do the ballot mailing, to have that added. Inbound tracking would particularly help address the issue when a voter's concerned we're not going to receive their ballot. Right now, we have no idea. We just wait anxiously, hoping it comes. If we had that code, unique code put on it going, to the voter, then we can have the unique code coming back, and we'd be able to track it both ways.
The voter could track it like a UPS
We put it in our
package.
office.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's an intelligent mail barcode that's on the, and we do unique ones going out. But there is, many jurisdictions do it for inbound. It just wasn't included in the contract when it was put out. So we've asked the state to please include that.
But the voter couldn't track his or her.
In my perfect ideal world, if the state would could update or change the vendor or the process for the entire absentee process, there's products that would allow those tracking at every step point of the process.
So a voter could see, well, I didn't get my ballot, I have to go vote.
Right. Or they could see, where it is if it's not getting to us.
Yeah.
We had, a ballot that was supposed to go to, where it's supposed to go to San Francisco and end up in St. Louis. So we can see it sitting in St. Louis, and we can send it to the post office and say what's going on with this, and in the meantime we can get another ballot to them because we know that one's not going anywhere. But if it's coming back to us, we don't really know where it is. And it doesn't give us any ability to do any deeper dives or studies or ask the post office to partner with us to try to kind of figure out where it is in the process. So I think that would be an improvement process on that end. I'm also attending in the first week of March, the USPS has a postal conference. No, I'm sorry, May, not March, May. They're having a postal conference, and there's an entire day devoted to election mail. So Margaret's having me attend that conference, and then I also regularly attend the election center that Allison was talking about earlier. Twice a year they have their election mail task force meetings, and so I've happened to hit several. They have one of them's in DC every year, and then I've been able to catch them in other places so that we can stay on top of what's going on, work with the USPS, and try to encourage them to
Expedite.
yes, and work through some of these problems and understand it from our perspective too. Questions?
Thank you, Jessica. Excellent.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay.
That's it, I think.
Well, we still have the new business item.
Dave, you said you had, did anybody- Dave,
Just
had
briefly.
I had a couple.
First,
What-
just the map.
Yeah, the map was just presented for informational
Right.
purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, Margaret attended one of their public hearings and wanted to make sure that we just, it's really just to watch this space. That, and if anybody's got questions process-wise, frankly, Jessica's been following it a lot more closely than I have. There is a map in circulation. Obviously, in the normal course of business, we wouldn't have another map until after the presidential upcoming election. Or actually after 2020, after the census. Watch this space. There are the maps that are in circulation. There would be some significant changes from what we have at present.
What's the gray? What district? What?
It's for the 2020, though, isn't it?
So that's
Well,
yeah.
And there's also a Supreme Court argument next week.
But this was the new
Right.
map.
Process-wise, Margaret wanted to make sure you all were aware that this was out, but I will defer questions on the process.
This is the commission that was required by the court to
Right. Yeah.
The commission was appointed by the judge.
Right. Yes. So we don't really know what is going on with
It's in
that.
flux.
Right.
Right.
I mean, right now we cannot change our lines. We are legally prohibited from moving our boundaries.
No, that's what I'm wondering.
So if that changes, we'll know.
Okay, so we have new business. I know David had some items.
Yes, the first one we kind of already covered, but I just want to make sure we're talking about the fiscal year 20 resources for the 12 precincts that had the 1 hour delays. Do we, in order to include it in Kevin's letter, do we need to propose an amount? Or, 'cause, I mean, I'm thinking it's 2 or 3 additional judges per precinct, but I don't know if there's any way to quantify.
Well, Margaret and Allison, you're going to work on input with that? Trying to build numbers in the letter as to the 12 precincts that have
And probably categories, right?
Right,
On the
right.
budget. Yeah.
Equipment versus
Where it
people
would-
versus,
yeah.
whatever is necessary. So
Line items, you know.
No.
I'm sorry?
Line items.
These are the ones that have.
Well, I guess we want to. Well, I guess then the board will have to approve them as part of the letter as to what to do. Okay. Second, I guess is a question. I noticed very shortly after our January meeting that the January meeting materials are no longer on the website. My impression was that once we were putting meeting materials on the website, for example, the presentation on that day about the wait times at the precincts, that material would stay on the website. And I'm wondering whether there's been a decision not to keep things there, or whether from now forward we can have meeting materials that, when it's put on the website, stay there, so that if someone hears about our meeting today, or if they listen to our recording, and they want to go back and look at what it is we were talking about, they can do so.
How long have they normally kept the minutes on?
Well, I think, and this may be we just have this gap here. In the past, the materials have been attached to the minutes, and they will continue to be attached to the minutes ultimately. But now that we are putting these materials up on the website, it's really just the current month's materials, I think, that are up on the website. And so what you're pointing out is that there's kind of a gap in between the time when we replenish with the new board meetings materials and when it subsequently shows up attached to the minutes.
There are numerous people who said to me, oh, they heard about the presentation about the wait times. They wanted to see it, and it's not available.
So we need to make sure that it's continually available.
So I thought, what most of the elected bodies do that I know of is they leave it up there. And that's
like forever, David, or is there a finite time that things aren't?
I'm not aware of a finite time with others. I could look into it if that's what we want.
People can reference back.
Right, exactly.
What would be your stance on having them attached to the minutes? Do they need to then be attached to the minutes if they're already on the site?
I would say that if they are easily accessible and findable, that they don't need to be attached to the minutes, because I think attaching to the minutes, people have to know that they're attached in order to find them there. Whereas the meeting materials, we have a meeting materials portion of the website. That does get to another point, though, which is that our meeting materials for the website is listed under, I believe it says board information. And it might make sense, at least when we are within a week of a board meeting, or when our materials are up there, to have some kind of notice on the front of the website, where it says what's new, to say, board meeting next week, here's how you get to the materials.
Yeah, as long as they're retrievable, that's important.
So, and my last item is a suggestion that I don't know requires an official board action, but I believe this may be our last meeting where all 7 of us are going to be present. Before the end of our term, and I was just going to suggest that we might want to arrange for an informal occasion, like to meet for a meal or something, to wish our colleagues who are leaving well.
I have that on my list.
And I realize that we have a scheduling issue with that, because everyone is very busy and everyone has different places they're going, and et cetera. And ordinarily I would say, let's attach it to one of our board meetings, but it doesn't sound like that will be possible for the next 2 months.
Yeah.
So
that's a good idea.
So anyway, I'd be happy to help with that.
I'm going to volunteer tonight.
As you always do.
No, that's a good suggestion. We'll definitely do. Just one thing with the future meetings, just a thought we can bring up next. We have to, by law, meet on, I think it's June 3rd. I think we have to, the new board, the new board will be sworn in on June 3rd, and then we have the election of officers. Do we want to have a meeting on May 20th and June 3rd? Just a thought to revisit next month. In other words, if we got to meet May 20th, June 3rd, and June 17th.
Don't we usually, for the swearing in, is kind of an orientation for the new board members?
Yes.
Because I wouldn't want us to skip that.
No, no, June 3rd is mandatory by law.
Right. What I'm saying is that I think in the past, the June 3rd or equivalent meeting has been a swearing in and then a discussion of everything there is to being a board member, essentially.
And they get a binder.
A binder that's really, really large.
Yeah, well, let's think about it.
Do we have a biannual
What's that?
meeting? Is it an executive function?
So-
Well, we could piggyback on it.
The
I'll talk to you.
staff sidebar you're seeing, we'll make sure that we do provide materials.
You have a Mayo meeting the
Scheduling.
week of May 20th.
And we have, is that when we have
Is that the mandatory
I
meeting
will
or
be in
not?
Denmark.
How come?
Is that this year?
Oh, let's just something to think about for next month.
20th is the mayor meeting.
No,
It's the week of May 20th.
Where? OC?
The whole? It's not
No.
It's not, where is it?
It's in Ocean City,
Is
yeah.
it in Ocean City?
It's May 1 to 1.
Oh, shucks.
I don't know that it's May.
All right, so let's.
I know it's
in June.
It's not. I was asked to speak at the Mayo meeting, and I can't because I'm going to be in trial that week in federal court.
One is it? You're in trouble.
Well,
Okay.
I know I'm not available. I know that much. I'll be in front of Judge Bennett.
And so we're
You will
going
not be
to
available for Ocean
So we're going to discuss our meeting schedule.
next month.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to discuss the meeting schedule next month. What I want to do is adjourn this meeting and just take like a 3-minute, 4-minute recess because there's a couple of people in the room that I want to personally meet.
So
I want to
we're going to
introduce the
close
others.
this meeting and go to executive committee meeting?
No, let's close this
We're
meeting.
going to close this meeting and go to executive meeting after about a 5-minute break.
Yes.
Close. I mean, I move to close the public meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn the
I move.
meeting?
Let's go.
Is there?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.